Hello, everybody. We are live from the garage. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I'm humbled by the applause every single time. Hello. Now, as you guys notice, it's a little different in the background. I took the feedback. It was a little bit much, a little distracting. And that's okay. Change is good. I'm listening and learning. All right. As Lara would say, learning and loving and learning. All right. So today we have the follow-up, the much anticipated follow-up. I hope y'all are enjoying Labor Day. Labor Day, I think, encompasses exactly America as a whole. Okay. The only country to invent weekends so people can stop working and then celebrate it with a holiday that most of the workforce will not have off today. So, America. All right. What we're going to do today, guys, just to set some rules. Okay. The comments are open, as you guys can see, and I am loving the participation so far. But let's keep it above board. Let's ask real big questions. Okay. Big questions, because we want to answer the broad strokes. We want to dive into those things. Okay. So let's try to not be too much trolly. Okay. Let's keep it good. So without further ado, let me bring on the esteemed, the magnificent Mitch Brisker. Hello, Mitch. Good morning.
Nora, hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Great. Good to see you again. Very interesting conversation we were having in the run-up to this Q&A.
Yeah. And how's your weekend? So I made lemon ricotta pancakes and bacon for the kids and everything. So I have just had a delicious meal.
Nice. That would, pancakes put me to sleep. I spent the weekend looking for a place to live because I'd be like, I don't do great with carbs.
Carbs are not your friend. Carbs are my friend. I love bread.
I love carbs, but I don't do great with them.
Yeah.
No, I love them. I mentioned a book last week, The Black Swan, written by Nicholas Taleb. And
right.
He's a very
you brought that.
guy. Yeah. And one of my favorite quotes is, he said, in America, the worst three addictions are heroin, carbohydrates, and a monthly paycheck.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say I've been addicted to all three at one time or another.
Yeah.
So I kind of hit the trifecta of addictions. So here we are, a few days later, and I got to tell you, I think both of us were so pleased at all of the positive reactions. So.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it was definitely, it wasn't like 100% rainbows and kittens, and that's okay.
No.
But it was, I want to thank the audience for really listening to the conversation, for giving it a chance, because I know that, listen, I tried my best to do less to no interrupting. I think I did a better job, but I'm not perfect, But I think we did a good job of like hearing each other out and like having a good discussion about, the things that we talked about. And I know that right now you have some statements that you want to make about things. Is that correct?
I do, but I just found out that I'm on the wrong mic. I'm on the wrong mic. There, does that sound better?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I know that's a little crisper. Well, let me give you the floor here. Take it away, Mitch, with what you want to say.
Well, one thing I wanted to say is that since our last since the stream that we did, somebody reached out to me, somebody I know who was in management in 2019. They're no longer on the Sea Org, to tell me that there was a very explicit policy as of 2019 that minors are no longer allowed in the Sea Org as of 2019. Now, I got two things to say about that. The most important thing is, let's take the win. I was in Scientology in 2019, so I can't really take the win, but you and the community can, because I would ascribe that to pressure from the community.
Yeah.
So, yeah, rather than getting into what it is, And then the other thing I want to say about it is, okay, that's their policy. Scientology is famous for bending their own policies. so there's that too, right? I'm not just going to.
Right. I mean, that's the outward-facing policy. That's what they're saying. That doesn't.
No. This is internal. This is not external.
But
this is 100%
you know what I mean? Like, that's
internal.
what they're telling people. And then, of course, if this, like, for example, the girl that I covered, that Tony did the article on, who started her training at 8, now she's at 8. I guarantee you, if she
Right.
was like, well, I need to join the Sea Org and she's 15, they're not going to be like, oh, no, well, hold off. We can't take you now.
I don't know. I don't know.
I think if her parents signed her away and she, got somehow, legally emancipated, they would take her.
Yeah. But what? Hold on. I
Is
gotta
that
let
your
my
dog?
dog in. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why he's doing that. Just hold on.
He wants to be
I'll
with
be
you.
right back. No, somebody's here and he's barking. Hey, Weston, can you come in here?
He's
Weston, come
protecting
here.
you.
Come here. No, he doesn't want to. He wants to stand at the door. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, I take it on face value. I think that that's an internal policy, and
Yeah.
I don't know about this girl. I mean, she's in an Ivy League college. Chances are she's not going to join the C word.
Yeah.
She's getting a degree in, and since you brought that up, another thing I wanted to mention, that article, what they referred to her as the new teenager. What was
the
it? Right?
new
It was
breed
like,
of teen.
yeah, the new breed of teen. This has been going on for so long. What's it? You know him, and I met him when he was a boy. The Chait kid, he was on your board for a bit.
Joey Chait?
Is he Chait?
My
Yeah,
student,
Joey
yeah.
Chait.
Joey, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I taught him
Joey.
at Lewis Carroll as well. Yeah.
Oh, you worked at Lewis Carroll?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I had no idea. Oh, okay. No, I think my kids were there for a little bit. No, actually, my
when were your kids there?
Oh, well, they're 30 and 27.
Were they there? Were they there between 94 and 95?
Could have been.
I taught your kids then. I was the PE teacher. And
out in the valley, right? Where were they?
Yeah,
they were out in
You have to ask your kids. Ask your kids next time you talk to them if they remember Nazi Nora. And I know I just said that word, but that's what the kids used to jokingly call me that because I was very tough during PE. Very tough.
They also spent.
If they remember that.
I will. They spent a few months at the ranch in New Mexico.
Oof.
Well, one of them was kind of okay with it because he was kind of too little to realize it, and the other one he had a rough time with it because he was going through. But whatever. But I went there. I mean, I drove my kids there.
Yeah,
and,
Lewis
and
Carroll,
it was all about
man. What a dumpy school.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That place was horrid. And I have to say that it's worth noting. I was gone a lot at Gold, and their mother was trying to go up the bridge. So that's where the kids got dumped there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Really, because of the...
Right. But it was marketed to you guys as the School of the Arts for actors and singers. It's art school. Yeah. We have a dance teacher, Yeah. No, it was awful. No teacher there was accredited, by the way. Not one teacher had an actual degree in teaching. Not one of them.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah.
But my point is,
I was teaching PE and reading to kindergarten through 12th graders. I had no I just graduated high school. They're like, "Oh, you're qualified."
Yeah, exactly. Are you a Scientologist? You got the job.
Right?
Yeah, but the thing with Joey, the reason I mentioned Joey Chait, that's been going on forever. I mean, what Joey was like OT5 and class 5 when he was like 15 or something. I remember.
He was class 5 very early on, and then he went OT before he turned 18. But I do want to clarify one thing about Joey being on the board or not on the board. Sure. In the first incarnation of the SPTV board, he was on there on paper, and then before the paperwork got filed, he decided to that for his life choices, and he's very busy. He's a good friend of mine. He has a very demanding job. He was like, I can't commit to that. So when the paperwork got filed, he was actually not on the board. Just to clarify that, because people are like, so everybody's leaving the board or whatever, and that's not. And I'm not a board member. I don't have anything to do with that. But just to clarify that one thing, he wasn't actually ever officially like a voting member. He was there for like a hot second and then decided he didn't want to do it.
It was just a reference point. I wasn't trying to bring up anything.
Oh, no. I'm just,
but my point is,
I'm only clarifying that for the trolls out there, not for you, Mitch, but yeah.
Okay. But the thing is, there's always been one of these little stars. Like, there's a girl I knew quite well. She worked at S&P for a couple of years. A young girl, woman, and a couple of kids. Jenny Good, who was the world's youngest OT8.
Right.
So there's always been one of these. But the thing is, they're outliers in Scientology. And then they point to them.
At 14, and I was becoming one of those. So it's like.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, there's always the person that they're like, we're going to hang the moon
Yeah.
on this kid. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, based on the way they talk about Scientology and the promises they make, they should be able to produce an entire magazine with an entire graduating class from Harvard of kids that are all
Exactly.
Scientologists, but they don't exist. You know, basically, you get these kids, they're all from privileged families. Uh, you know, Jenny's parents are wealthy OTAs, big donors.
Right. Right.
Joey's parents were, Izzy
Huge
and I forget.
donors. Yeah.
Yeah, huge. So they're very bubbled and they're very, siloed into how wonderful Scientology is, and
Hmm.
they kind of get this hothouse orchid upbringing,
Yeah.
and then Scientology points to them. I mean, and then some of them don't do well. I don't, not to bring it up, but like Liz's brother, some of them have terrible
Yeah. I mean,
outcomes.
yeah. I mean, but see, this is the dark side of it where, I've tried and I don't think I've ever it'd be impossible to fully cover the amount of pressure that's on you. Right. And so that's why
Right.
I do it a lot. Talking about that pressure that comes on you just for having the displeasure of being born a Scientologist. And that goes for whether you're born a public, if your parents are very devoted, or if you're born into the Sea organization back in the 70s and 80s when that was still happening.
Right. Right.
It's two different pressures, but it's the same pressure in that those people firmly hold the belief that you chose them. You saw in the
Mm-hmm.
ether that these two idiots were pregnant. It was like, these are the idiots I'm going with. I mean, like, no offense, my dad's dead and my mom is still very much alive. But like, let's be honest, if I was super OT and I was like, cause over matter, energy, space, and time, I would have been like, oh no, thank you very much to all of that, because my dad was like, he had traumatic brain injury. He had huge amounts of PTSI from coming home from Vietnam. He had obsessive compulsive gambling and lying, and like just was not in so many aspects not an adequate human to be a father to anybody, including me. My mom has her own, catalog of trauma that she grew up with. And like thinking, if you're super OT, you're supposed to know everything, right? Even stuff that didn't exist in the knowledge base that we have now, right? Like generational trauma, that was not discussed. In the 70s, nobody knew what that was. What generational
No.
trauma? That's not a thing.
No.
Or even the concept of PTSI, or because like as I've said to my mom, many times, like we've talked a lot over the years about coming out of Scientology, and I've gently suggested to her, you should look at me, mom, I'm doing all this therapy. It's really helping. Like, maybe you should do therapy. And her generational response to that as a boomer is, I don't need to go to the loony bin, like I don't need a straitjacket, because that was, like, let's face it, when you and my mom were growing up, like people who were in therapy were either super rich because they were bougie and they could afford it, right? Or they were insane. That was it. There was no like, hey, this is just to help you with your day to day because being a human is fucking hard. Like everyone was like, sure, it's hard. Who cares? Walk it off, kind of a thing. So, I'm still working on that. I hope I can.
Therapy. Therapy was definitely a luxury designer
Mm-hmm.
item back in those days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or for the, criminally insane who had to be, one flew over the
Well,
cuckoo's nest,
but I think there was the image of the kind of Beverly Hills Rodeo Drive
Oh, sure.
therapist, and then there was the many people. They all went to the hospitals. They all got locked up. They got
Right.
the guys with the butterfly nets came and got them. And then, fortunately, to some degree, that was true. I mean, you look at Francis Farmer. I mean, some of the fodder that we had in Scientology that we used against psychiatry was true. I mean,
Oh, sure.
Francis Farmer's mother destroyed her life. Had her locked up and shocked and all
I
kinds of
mean,
things.
but see, here's the difference. And I pointed this out the other day, is that psychiatry and psychology, yes, very early on were quite barbaric.
Mm-hmm.
It was very like, we got to fix it. And so like, oh no, we took half their brain, but they can still poop and pee. They're okay.
Yeah. They're
But,
quiet.
Right. They're quiet now. They're quiet.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
psychology, psychiatry, the profession of therapy has grown, has
Oh yeah.
learned, has
Yeah.
evolved many new techniques and things like that, and embraced a lot of aspects of
Yeah.
spirituality even now, where and all kinds of stuff. Whereas Scientology is completely fixed. It is unmovable. It is unchangeable.
Right.
It will not grow. It will not evolve ever. Right. And it started out from a guy who had some insanely bad ideas and never moved forward, right? And so it ironically they became the thing that they were accusing psychiatry of. Do you know what I mean? Because now they are a
Yeah.
barbarism.
Yeah.
You know.
If you have a black and white television with a round screen and rabbit ears, that's Scientology.
Oh, my grandparents had one of those. I remember like
Yeah.
adjusting the rabbit ears and stuff.
Well,
Yeah,
I guess they're
for
Scientology.
sure.
I didn't want to get off. I know we didn't want to get up in the whole talk about psychiatry, but
No,
I
no,
mean,
no. It's important, but it's important. It's relevant.
yeah, but we could do a stream on that and on
We do a
dynamics
whole
because I
thing
have
on
a
that.
lot to say
But
about
let's do this, guys.
that.
I'm gonna now type in the magic word here into my thing here. I'm gonna type in question. Let's keep the questions above board. All right. Yeah. Thank you. I
Yeah, no,
just
there's
said that and
one
I
other.
didn't even read this. Mama Opal says, let's keep the chat above the board. Ask big questions, no trolling. Mama Opal and I, we are here. We are here. Thank you. All right.
Yeah,
Stacey
no,
Toms.
one more thing.
Oh, yeah, go
One
ahead.
more thing. I just wanted to mention is a statement.
Yes.
Um, it could be attributed to a number of people, but I kind of wanted to address it. It came up in our last.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and it was the idea that someone went to the FBI and nothing changed,
Hmm.
right? And I just kind of I wanted to point out that this is a very subtle form of victim shaming because the and I'm not impugning anybody. I'm just asking people if you think that rhetoric might make sense or be useful to kind of just check yourself a second and maybe think about it. It's not that different from saying to like a person who's in an abusive relationship, your spouse has been beating you for 10 years and you went to the police and nothing happened. Things are still the same. They're not locked up or whatever. So it's like any time you make the victim the part of the problem, that you're shaming the victim. It's like what Scientology does when you're abused in Scientology and you go to the ethics officer and it's like, well, what was your part of that? What did you do? It's kind of pointing it back at the person. So
Yes,
it's
I mean,
just
I don't totally agree with that. I get the
okay.
point that you're trying to make, that people made
Yeah,
an effort and they went and spoke to law enforcement to talk about
right.
uncomfortable things,
Uh,
right? And so my
uh,
point that I've made many times, and here's the problem with the statements about that. Okay, is that the
right.
statement universally from people who have said I've gone to the FBI, the follow up sentence is, and I told them everything. Now, the proper phraseology, in my opinion, is to say, when I first left the Sea Org, which was now 10 years ago, that's a long time,
Uh-huh.
I told the FBI everything I could recall at the moment that I thought was important. And we did hours of interviews and I answered all the questions they asked me. And as the years have gone on, if I've thought of something else, I've reached out to that agent and try to fill them in, right? That would be a far more accurate statement than the one that gets tripled down on, which is I went to the FBI and I told them everything. I know that that's
Well, I
scientifically
don't.
impossible to have done
Well,
that.
but
It's a
yeah,
scientific
I
fallacy
understand.
for somebody who's
No,
just
no,
coming
you're
out of
100%.
trauma, who's literally walking away from a fire. Okay, they're still burnt, they're still on fire, and then they're going to describe to the firemen everything that happened to start the fire and how they got out,
Yeah,
because the interview process takes place over time, because witnesses, especially ones who have been in extreme trauma, remember things in increments, and sometimes it comes to them years later because trauma affects your memory. That's just
yeah. So
science. That's not me making that up.
yeah, no, I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
And thank you for using science as your shield. That's great. No,
Well, it's not a shield. That's just
I'm
facts.
just joking. I'm just joking. I know, but you don't have the numbers there. But the thing is, I've read the same thing you have.
Uh-huh.
So what you're saying completely resonates with me. I
Sure.
don't have a problem with that. But I'm not talking about the way in which the person may have acted in the interview, what they remembered, what they didn't remember, how they then described it. which I'm not a fan of people being interviewed by law enforcement and then talking about their interview because I don't think law enforcement likes that.
No,
But what I'm
sometimes that
talking
fucks up a
about,
case. Sure.
yeah, but what I'm talking about is identifying the person as part of the problem because they went to the law enforcement and nothing happened. That's the part that I'm
Well, and
addressing.
that wasn't even, I mean,
Which,
and the point I personally have made is that these guys went to the FBI, okay, said what they said, and nothing happened. My fault is
well,
then pointed,
but we don't
but
know
hang on,
that.
but then the problem is that the FBI, and this is where I'm pointing the finger at, not at the people who bravely came forward and talked to law enforcement, even though we were trained never to do that, okay, is that the FBI has information that frankly, any single one of these people's stories, okay, who have left, who have told everything that happened in the situation, in my personal opinion, law enforcement should have like fucking shut everything down 20 years ago with all of the information that they now have cumulatively
Right.
about all of the incidents and everything. My anger is pointed at law enforcement, not at the people who went forward. But what happens is that you get criticized and they say, well, I went to the FBI. Okay, so now the FBI has done nothing. The FBI isn't doing anything.
No, but you don't know that. You don't know that.
Well,
You
I know
actually
that
don't know
because
that
that's
they've
what
done
I'm
nothing.
observing with my eyes is that the FBI is not
Yes.
doing anything. They're not.
Yeah, and
Nothing has
I'm
happened.
not.
David Miscavige is in shackles. The organizations are still there. None of these front groups
Right.
are shut down. Like, do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
that.
Yeah,
Of course,
totally.
I
I
don't
completely
have
understand your
inside view
frustration.
into the inner workings of the FBI. That's clear. Like, I
Okay.
don't
Just
work
hold on
for
a second.
them. I don't know
Yeah,
anything
I'm
that's going
just
on in
trying
those
to,
buildings.
Nora, all I'm trying to point out is that the rhetoric of pointing out that a person went to the FBI
Hmm.
and that nothing happened makes it seem like that person's part of the problem. Like, and I believe that I was told,
Hmm.
but did you follow through? Are you calling them every day? Are you protesting in front of their office or whatever? Okay, let me just point something out with regard to the FBI. For one thing, a lot
Sure.
of the stuff that people report is not a state matter, is a state matter, it's not a federal matter. A lot of the stuff we talk about
Sure.
with the kids and so forth, they've told me that. And if it has to do with Miscavige, and I probably shouldn't say this live, but they're happy to have it because they're building a profile of
I'm
him,
sure they
even
are,
though
but
it,
it's like it's the same
but
beef.
hold
I'll
on,
be
hold on,
honest with you.
hold on. I let you
Yeah,
talk. Just let me
go ahead.
finish, please. But if I could just remind you, the last time the FBI interacted with a religious group, they were the Branch Davidians, and it
Correct.
did not go well. It did
No,
not go well. They're really they would rather leave. I think they'd rather leave Scientology alone than risk another one of those,
no, nobody
especially
wants
when
to
you
see
talk.
another Waco. No.
Yeah, so they're very cautious, and I think personally, I think they're playing a long game, whatever. Um, and I think a lot of the things that are actionable at a state level or a
Mm,
local level, and they're not going to really be concerned. The
yeah.
FBI doesn't, they don't turn around and report. I mean, I've had personal experience with this. A friend of mine was interviewed by the FBI about a drug smuggling friend of his, somebody I knew. The FBI walked up to him in front of his apartment. The guy was carrying a denim laundry bag with 10 kilos of pot in it. And the FBI said, drop the bag. And then they interviewed him and they said, okay, you can have your pot now. See you later. They're just not interested. It's just a local matter. So I would just,
I know, and
it's just a
this
rhetoric.
is my own
I
frustration though
felt,
with how law
yeah,
enforcement
I hear you.
takes
I
too
hear you.
long because in between the time that I've been speaking out now 20 years basically, how many more lives have been lost? How many more people have unalived themselves?
yeah,
How many more people have been bankrupted, had their identities stolen, had their lives ripped apart,
yeah,
had their family
many,
torn from
many,
them?
many, many.
In that, right. And so this is the problem in terms of this is my beef with the FBI. Like,
Uh-huh.
okay, we told them all these things, right? And it's the same beef. I'll be honest with you. Like, I know I don't do politics here, but this is a beef that, like, Merrick Garland, as an example, as the attorney general, took like
Mhm.
a gajillion years to file an indictment on Trump, which I thought was like, the evidence is just all sitting there. I don't know what we're investigating, And that's the same way I feel about Scientology. It's like we have all these channels that are talking about it. We are interviewing people who have escaped. We're talking about all the things that happened. I mean, frankly, you could pick any single one of these fucking torturous, human, disgusting rights violations of any one of the kids who grew up at the Int Ranch. Just pick one, okay? And that itself should shut down Scientology. A Rosemary's Story, just by itself, should shut it down, what they're doing to elders. Like, that's where my outrage comes from. It's not mostly at
Okay.
the people, but it's partially at the people. Okay. And here's the part where it gets kind of like a sticky wicket. When you have a wealth of data, right? And unless you clearly state, because I don't know, for the audience, for the people at large, or even to me privately, like, hey, I can't comment on all this other stuff because there's an ongoing investigation that I'm not allowed to talk about. Like, no comment. That would make sense to me, right? Because they need certain things to stay under wraps. You can't talk about certain things because it's part of the investigation. I get that. I've watched every season of Law and Order. Like, I understand. Okay. But when you don't have that as a caveat from law enforcement, then in my personal opinion, there's nothing holding you back from discussing the things that could then ignite a fire under the ass of other local law enforcement, as you're pointing out. Sometimes it's a state, sometimes it's a very local thing, to get some justice going, right? Because that's
Yeah,
what we need, is we
I
need
hear you.
action happening. We don't, yes, we see it. Apparently, we still need to hear these stories. We still need to hear all the horrific things that went on, because it's just not enough yet. The torture and the everything else
Yeah, listen.
is not enough
Okay.
yet for action.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to speak now.
Go ahead.
My only point is anybody who's going to law enforcement, highly likely they've been victimized.
Correct.
Regardless of how they remember it, regardless of, you're right, you can't say anything. If you're the sanest person in the world and I ask you about 20 years of your life, you're not going to be able to tell me everything. You're going to be able to tell me some highlights, some important things. And of course, you're invited to follow up. My only point is, considering that the vast majority of the people who are being asked by law enforcement for an interview are victims, let's not in any way make them part of the problem. Even if they misspeak, even if they say, I told them everything, like, let's not let that trigger our frustration to the point where then we make them part of the problem. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Like, show them some grace.
That's fine, but that's not. I mean, I like, let's just take a specific person. Okay, let's just take Mike Render as a specific person that I've picked on a lot. I've done a lot of picking on Mike. Okay,
Sure.
Something that he has repeated is that phrase: I went to the FBI and I told them everything.
Okay. Well,
and my beef with that, in particular, with that particular person, because not everybody has the same knowledge, right? In terms of, like, you have a vast amount of knowledge I have no knowledge of, because of where we were in Scientology and who we interacted with, right?
Yeah,
and
I know what
versa.
it's like. Just let me interject. I know what it's like to fly over and drop leaflets from a B-52, and you know what it's like to stab people in the front. I mean, I'm flying over dropping bombs, and you're working with them one-on-one. So we both have a lot of things to talk about. It's just different experience.
Sure. We have we have different points of view from being inside the same thing, right? But when somebody with that particular base of knowledge, okay, with that wealth of knowledge, insider type thing, that unless they are under a gag order in his particular instance, right? I personally believe that there are things that should be laid out so that they can be actionable, that those people can feel seen and heard, and know that they're not crazy, that those things did happen to them. Because that's part of what happens in Scientology, is that you say X happened to me and you get twisted and convinced to believe that you did something and you made that happen to you, rather than somebody punching you in the face and then you're like, well, I pulled that in because X, Y, and Z, right? So just to know that those things were real, that they happened, that there was evidence taken, that was hidden in a folder somewhere, that, whatever the procedure was, okay? Gives relief to the person, right? Because then they know they're not crazy. They know that it's real, right?
Yeah,
That's
totally. Or
in
the case of the Truth Rundown, that you misperceived it because of your own actions. Okay. Yeah, but I don't want to single out any individual. My only point is, and I think we should just move on, is that all of the people being spoken to at one level or another are victims, and they should be shown some grace. And it's like, it's really,
Hmm.
you can point, as far as I'm concerned, point out all you want, the ineptitude of the lack of apparent lack of action on the part of law enforcement. But let's not make the people being interviewed like part of the problem. Like, well, they went there and nothing happened. So let's move
And
on.
I
The
don't,
last thing
and if I made it seem like that was their fault, I apologize for that, because that's
I
not, I
did,
don't think
no,
it's their
I
fault
did
that
because
law enforcement is
yeah.
ineffectual. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
Like,
I do, but because I was specifically pointed out as you went to the FBI, nothing happened. What's the follow up? Are you following up? Like,
mm,
whoa, I'm not part of the problem. So let's move on. One last
okay,
minor little thing is
okay,
I mentioned last time, if you don't mind.
go ahead.
Okay, if I mentioned last time about the way that Miscavige mirrors Tom, right? Who talked about
Sure.
him recreating himself as a super celebrity and blah blah blah. I never got to the point about how, and it's a small thing, but I really want to make the point because this is not my mental deduction. This is like observation,
Hmm.
like direct observation that Tom has mirrored himself as an evil cult leader. So they have
Mm,
this cross
I can see that.
pollination where I'm going to dress like you. I'm going to be the world's top ethics officer like you.
Oh
Do you
yeah.
remember? I think it was Leah who pointed out that Tom had called this meeting a celebrity center
Yes.
with a bunch of people, and he was like, "You got to get your stuff together and
Yeah.
get your ethics in." And yeah, so it's very much a mirror, and, and we've seen his tone, like in the famous black turtleneck video. That whole tone was I mean, I walked through the editing bay. I wasn't working on that video, but I'd walk through
The
the editing
black
bay all day
turtleneck,
long, and
man, that is just,
yeah,
I don't know what they
I
were
would stop,
thinking. I
and
don't know what was going on through
I know,
somebody's mind there.
I know exactly what they were thinking. I would say Miscavige made at least 1,000 edits in that thing. He was
Oh wow.
obsessed with it being perfect, and that was his idea, perfect. And I remember walking through there and looking at that thing and saying, "Wow." Like, Dave's been coaching Tom to kind of be this kind of uber, cult leader. Anyway, I just wanted to say that there's this mirroring thing, and people talk about Tom having some high position in the church. He doesn't. He's Dave's best friend. It's not much of a position. He's never going to take over. But
Yeah.
it's a very interesting kind of narcissistic cross pollination of two individuals mirroring one another. And with that, unless you have something to add,
No, let's jump in
um,
these questions here.
yeah,
All right. First question is for you, Mitch, from Stacy
sure.
Toms. If you had
Yeah.
to do it over, looking back and knowing what you know now, would you have joined Scientology or taken another path?
Well, if I had my choice about which thing I wasn't going to do, it would be not doing heroin at 15. Okay, because that's how I ended up in Scientology. So, I mean, these are like, you know, no, it was perfect. I am who I am because of all of the horrible things that happened to me and good things in Scientology. I wouldn't change a thing. Or, I mean, how do you even answer that? Your
Well,
perspective
if
from,
you had a time machine and you could go talk to yourself, right? You could go talk to your baby self,
uh-huh.
and that day where you were going to get into Scientology, which, got you off heroin, would you have talked yourself into going to like a different rehab and not walking into Scientology?
No, because my 23-year-old self, well, only if this self showed up and said, "Look, dude, I got some heroin for
That's what
you.
I'm
Let's
saying.
go
Yeah.
get high. Let's go get high. Fuck this Scientology stuff." I don't know. I mean, it's just I don't. I mean, I don't kind of think that way because you think like it's too complicated. Like there's a when you have a marriage that falls apart, you're like, "Oh man, I married the wrong person." But you have kids. So all of a sudden, other things are complicated. It's like the butterfly effect. What else would have happened?
Yeah.
It's like people have struggled with the question of fate versus free will
Hmm.
forever, right?
Yeah.
Going back to the Greeks and so forth about, are things just fated by the gods or do you have free will, whatever. And I can never think of his name. Some smart person in the chat is going to probably put it in there. There was a Greek philosopher who his entry into this argument was your character is your fate. So like you think about what's going to happen to David Miscavige. You want to know what's going to happen to him? Look at his character. Your character is that points you in the direction of where you're going to go. It's not
Right.
fated. You want to change your future, change your character. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, everything I know now, it would have been the last thing I did. I would have, I don't know. It's like I was thinking about going to Synanon, which is a very famous drug rehab place, but I didn't because they were becoming noted as a cult. Like,
Right.
how ironic is that?
Right. Yeah.
Right? So it's like, well,
Yeah.
don't go there. They're a cult. Go into Scientology. That's kind of new age stuff or whatever. I just, it's hard for me to answer the question because the moment in which I showed up at Celebrity Center, I was so traumatized that I wouldn't listen to anybody. I don't know, or maybe I would listen to anybody, which is why when Scientology said, well, if you really apply yourself, we can help you, which is why I bought it.
Yeah.
But I've thought about this, like, what would I change if I could go back? It would be getting into drugs at 15 because
Yeah.
that's the thing that threw everything off. So,
Yeah.
and in that case, I never would have gotten involved in Scientology. I
Okay.
wouldn't. I
Well, there
thought,
you go.
yeah,
There you go. We have a lot of questions for you here, Mitch. Here you go. Next one
okay,
from
good.
Audrey, the sassy Parisian. Mitch, are you proud of some of the films you had to create and produce for Scientology, or do you loathe them?
Wow, that's such a loaded question. So if I love them,
Well, like,
I
I mean,
love.
it could be a mixed bag. Give
Okay,
us,
look, I here. Okay, so I'm going to review. I'm going to refer to my good friend Lenny Riefenstahl, the Nazi propagandist. Okay, and Lenny said, "What do I have to?" People were saying you should apologize for making the two of the greatest propaganda films of all time, films that are even studied today, right? She said, "What do I have to apologize for? My films took all the top awards." Now, I don't have that attitude. I actually have apologized. Um, what I what I am proud of, but proud is really not the right word. It's more a matter of having professional standards and knowing that you maintained your professional standards. Like I worked because I was a loyal Scientologist and I did believe that community, the community and the structure that I discovered when I first got in had been helpful to me. Um, and so I felt a mission to take that abysmal work. It took me like 8 years to get the crew trained. I always did my work at the highest professional level I possibly could. I'm proud of the fact that I maintained my standards. Okay. I'm not, I'm glad that my name isn't on those films. I mean, I'll tell you a story. I these are I keep being put in a position where I have, in order to make a point, I have to refer to a personal conversation, which isn't always the
well, you
smartest
don't
thing to
have
do.
to. I mean, it's okay.
No, I
You
know,
know,
but this okay. So there is a television executive who was involved with a very famous anti-Scientology show that won Emmys. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. And those people were focused over the 3 seasons of production on that show. They were highly focused on the media coming out that had come out of the church. I met with this person they were trying to help me get some work. And I said, look, my resume is, it's all 30 years. It's just stuff for Scientology. I mean, I have stuff before that and a bunch of awards and stuff. And they said, yeah, but we know your work. We were blown away by the quality of the work coming out of the church. And you did that. And I would love to help you get work. So am I proud of that? Or am I, it's like, it's sad that not a lot of people have that view. It's hard for
yeah.
me. I mean, I've joked about it. Like I wrote, one of the things I did is when I was starting to write, and my book started out as a kind of a kind of what would you call it, like a journaling on steroids, right? Uh, and I was on LinkedIn. A, it's not good platform for me, it's not a platform I really believe in or interact with much. But I was on LinkedIn. There were a bunch of Scientologists on LinkedIn, and they all knew I was on LinkedIn. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to change my statement about myself, right? And it basically says, I wrote this thing. I don't have it here. I'd read it. It says, if you're wondering who was responsible for making Scientology look, you know, because I mean, we made it look like a shiny object, like back in the early 2000s and so forth. There was a
Sure.
lot of, if you look at the TV show, it's really high quality stuff. I mean, it makes you want to puke, and a lot of it is derivative. But it was a level of quality that I set the standard for, and so I wrote this thing very self-deprecating. If you're wondering who's responsible for making those Super Bowl ads that cause people to air puke in sports bars across America, and say what the f is Scientology doing on my Super Bowl? If you're wondering who did it, I did that. But just keep in mind, if I can make them look good, maybe I can make you look good too. So I'm proud of the fact that I maintained a level of professionalism, that I didn't compromise that. Even when I got to the point of like, this is not what I want to do. I mean, I think part of it was coming out of commercials, because you do a lot of ads for, not a lot, but you will do ads for products that you don't necessarily believe in or even use. But you're always going to show those clients the utmost respect because they're writing the check. So I never compromised those artistic ideals. Uh, Leni Riefenstahl, she insisted that she worked for the Third Reich and maintained her artistic independence. I didn't. I've written about them. My artistic independence was completely co-opted by science. I had no artistic independence, right? So am I proud because I taught people very subtly that you're dooming a person to an eternity, like sending them to hell by not sending them to the law enforcement,
Sure.
things like that. Uh, but there's other messages in some of those films that I proud of doing this really the second time we did the film that takes place in Africa, they spared no expense. They let me do whatever I wanted. But it is Hubbard being a white savior going into Africa
Sure.
and helping these people, and he referred in the script to the children as pickaninnies. I mean, he was just a complete
No,
racist.
so racist. So racist.
In the script, it said pickaninnies. Well, nobody saw the script outside of Gold, but that was the description of the people, not a word.
I'm not gonna clear that word, guys. You're gonna have to, unfortunately, Google pickaninny. I can't even say it because it's an incredibly racist term from the turn of the 19th century, and
it's a pejorative term for a black child.
Yeah.
So he referred to the native children in one scene as pickaninnies. Now I hired a crew, and when I talk about trying to maintain my ethics, my integrity somewhat.
Sure.
When I came across that in the script, I'm like, I had hired maybe 30 actors who all lived in North Hollywood. They were all from Ghana. Because if you're going to redo Africa, you need to be very endemic about the specific place. You're not going to get some people from South Central, some people from the Valley. They're not going to look alike. They're going to be from all over the world. Not all white people, not all black people look the same. So there's this wonderful group of actors, artists, musicians in LA. They're all from Ghana, incredibly talented, right? So I hired these guys, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to give them the script to read, right? And you're never supposed to change one word that Hubbard wrote.
Right.
But I took that script and I just took the word pickaninny out. I said, the children are staring out the window. And nobody said anything. I didn't get in trouble because they all knew it would have been horrific to give them that script. So, but so the bottom line is I'm I'm satisfied that I maintain my artistic values while at the same time not maintaining my artistic independence. So.
Okay. All right. Question 2, Mitch.
Okay.
We got a lot of questions, so let's try.
Yeah, that's great.
I appreciated that answer. I'm just making a joke. All right. So Scientology Triggers asks, Mitch, I blew from the Sea Org in 1984. The training films I saw in 1984, essentially, were literally the quality of fourth graders. How did you improve production quality?
Oh, I was just going to read you my quote about those films. Yeah, I described them as they look like a bunch of children had put on a show when their parents were gone, except the costumes were worse. How did I improve it? Well, a bunch of things. For one thing, wow, so many. How did I improve it? Well, I mean, I made them look at hundreds of films. There's a list of films that Hubbard approved. It has about 200 films on it, and there's some good films on there. So much stuff is missing from there that they never saw. I made them watch tons of films, and in order. And a matter of fact, I mean, one of the reasons I got along well with the crew up there is they got to spend their study time on the weekends watching films. Because when I went to Kuala, I said these guys are like useless to me. They need to like start watching some films. Because here's the deal: they're supposed to be at the dissemination center of the world, and yet they're isolated from the world. They're supposed to be making films, and yet they're only seeing the films and knowing about whatever Hubbard told them about films. And he
Right.
didn't know shit. I mean, by their own accounting, if you count the numbers, he was in Hollywood for 10 weeks. You know, this big
Oh
career
yeah.
as a Hollywood screenwriter. He was there for 10 weeks.
Yep.
Nobody is in Hollywood for 10 weeks unless you hate it and quit or you're fired.
And we
Okay.
know what
Just
happened
a
with him.
yeah,
He was
yeah.
fired.
Well, yeah, basically he was no longer needed. But basically, he'd written all these pulps and the B movies. You know, they were called B movies. I mean, people don't realize that back in the days in the 50s, the only place that was air conditioned was the theater. So during the
Right.
summer, if you wanted to cool off, you went to the theater and you spent the entire day there. So you saw a
Right. You paid
newsreel and a
once and you could watch
cartoon.
the movie over and over and over.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that. If that
Oh,
could be true,
in
but
San
you
Francisco,
saw
where my mom grew up, you could do that, and you could walk into a film at any point in the film. So she would just show up when she got there, midway through a film, and then sit and watch the start that she had missed, and then leave.
right, right. But at the time when Hubbard was quote unquote in Hollywood, he'd
Sure.
written a bunch of dime novels, which had
Hmm.
sold a lot, which for dime novels, right? And they were really hungry for material. And in those days, you saw a newsreel, you saw a cartoon, you saw a serial like Buck
Right.
Rogers, then you saw the B movie, which was the second build movie. It's why we call them B movies. And then you saw the feature, which is why we call them
Hmm.
features, right? And so they had tapped some of Hubbard's dime novels for serials. Like nobody gave a shit about the serials. Half the people were buying popcorn and going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Like no, you know, we don't even remember them. The only one anybody can remember is what, like Buck Rogers or maybe
Yeah.
Hopalong Cassidy or something,
Right. Because those all
which were
became like TV shows later.
yeah, and they're
Right.
iconic. But the shit
Yeah.
that he did, yeah. And so there is one film that he and three other guys worked on the writing. The rest of them, he's just credited with story. But I don't even know why I got into that. But do you remember how we got? I
Yes,
was how
because you
we
had to
changed
put
this.
the Gold
So
Crew through basically a mini
yeah,
film school.
yeah, finishing school because they
Yeah.
all thought they'd been to film school because Hubbard. They compiled. Actually, Mark Fisher was the one who did this. I've spoken with him
Mm.
about it. They compiled what's called the City Basics course, which they just took a bunch of references out of books and they put it together. And then they had people. There was a course built around a book called The Five C's of Cinematography, which is a classic book. It's still used in film schools today.
Mm.
There's 35,000 copies of the original printing. I have one of them. And then it was eventually reprinted on as a paperback. And if anybody's out there, budding filmmaker, you have to read 5C cinematography. I'd had it in school, and then I went to Gold, and I had to do a course based around the book, right? So, but these guys, they didn't. It was like, here's how they were making films. They'd do a shot, then they'd open the book up to see, they look at their shot. Was that right? Did I do that right? Like they didn't know what they were doing, right? There
Yeah.
was no like real there was not the spirit of creativity and the ability to envision. And they didn't understand, like they understood the concept of a close up and a long shot and a medium
Hmm.
shot. They really didn't know why. They didn't know how that supported the telling of a story,
Right.
right? Beyond the, yeah. So they just never knew any of that stuff. So, um, and their lighting looked like soap opera lighting. And they just never really
And
had
let's face it,
anybody.
the makeup was horrific. If you've ever, and for
Everything
all the
was
ex
horrific.
Scientologists out there, let's just all remember Pro TRs. Okay. Let's just all remember the Pro TRs film from back in the day. That makeup was just like it
Yeah,
was somebody
everything.
came from a morgue and was like, I got this.
Yeah, no, everything about it was horrible. But like, you know, when we did, you mentioned the film the other day, the Angel film, the one that takes place in hell,
Right.
which is there's maybe three or four of the films that actually are kind of decent, clever stories,
Sure,
and the
sure.
rest of them are it's just boring as hell. It's like my dad used to say, even a broken clock's right twice a day. You know, he used to
Sure.
that old. So, but when we did that film, that was going to be a very, very challenging film for makeup, and these guys were having a lot of trouble with makeup, mostly because of the heat. Because I demanded that we shoot it with real fire as lighting, so we had tons of fire bars everywhere, and we had a guy who was the devil had a tail, and we had a puppeteer up in the greens, you know, up in the scaffolds, doing the tail, and it was 120 degrees up there, and the guy passed out and almost fell.
Well,
And
yeah.
it was really, yeah, no, but he was a professional puppeteer, but it was like, it was typical movie liability stuff. I mean, people do, there's safety officers on the set, and you try not to hurt anybody, but so anyway, nothing happened. But my point is, it was a very challenging makeup thing because the lead actress,
Right.
because of all of the fire, her makeup would only last an hour.
Right.
So then they would touch the makeup up, and then they would touch it up and touch it up, and it would just get worse and worse and worse during the day. And it was a huge problem. Like, we weren't getting shots that looked good, right? I mean, they look better than the film you mentioned.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we brought in, what's his name? Westmoreland. I can't think of his first name. One of the most famous makeup families in the history of Hollywood.
Okay.
We brought him in to solve the problem. So we did things like that. And the first thing he did was he lined the makeup girls. I mean, this is a guy. There are maybe three generations of them, and they're
Yeah.
yeah. So, and this is a guy who has like a couple of kids who became makeup artists, and then the other one, I said, well, what happened to your other kid? Why didn't they go into makeup? He said, oh, they weren't good enough. I was worried they ruined the family name. I mean, this guy was hardcore, right?
That's
And the
harsh.
first thing, yeah, that's hard. He lined up the makeup girls. He looked in their kits and he just started throwing things away and scolding them and bawling them out. Like, this sponge, you don't use a sponge again. You use that once, you throw it away. And so he said, what you have to do is once an hour, you got to take that actress and you got to scrub her face clean and redo her makeup. This cut our production by about 30%.
Oh,
And
yeah,
this
I'm sure.
was, can you imagine, David Miscavige writing to him going, dear sir, we're going to be getting one third, less shots from now on. And other, but
Because we have to
you
wash
know,
the actress's face every
yeah,
hour.
we have to do it right. This is how you would
Right.
actually do it. But no, I remember writing him and I said, look, you're either going to have a film or you're not. And if you want to have a film, you're going to have to, whatever. So it all worked out. I think I was cheating on my wife during that one too. But no, anyway, no,
Dear Mitch's
no, I'm just
wife,
joking.
please take note. No, I'm just kidding.
No, she's a terrific gal. I have nothing bad to say
I'm
about
sure
her.
you guys already hashed all that out. We're talking about something that occurred like 30 years
No,
ago, guys. Like,
no,
so.
we never did. But there's
Oh,
no reason to.
okay.
Yeah, it's all fine.
I
It's
mean, you guys
whatever.
are
It's
fine
still
now,
over.
is what I'm trying to say, right? Like, you have a.
Yeah, we
Like,
just don't ever talk, but it's
okay.
fine. Yeah, there's no problem. There's no problem. There's no problem. It's just we never talk.
Oh my
So
God. Do your
so
kids know all this? Are they watching this?
oh yeah, I wouldn't say anything on YouTube that
Okay.
I wouldn't say to my kids.
Okay, good.
I absolutely wouldn't.
No. Because sometimes when
And
we're
I don't.
talking casually, things come out, and then you're like, "Oh, I totally didn't say that to the person who is involved in it." Like,
No,
I'm not sure. Yeah,
no. They may not like me saying that, but I'm not saying anything I don't know about. And I on
sure.
purpose, I don't really talk about them because this is a public forum, and if they want to come on and
Yeah,
join me and talk, that's fine. But anyway, another thing.
I
Let me see. They
appreciate
were
that.
shooting.
I respect that.
Yeah, what else did I do to help the thing out? I got them to change lights. I mean,
Hmm.
the one thing they did decently, although the way they did it was very inefficient, was record sound, because Hubbard was a real freak on sound recording, and the way they did it was very inefficient. But the end result they got was very good. So I never had
Hmm.
to mess around with audio. But I went through film scoring, and because the film scoring was horrible, and and also they were shooting on 16 millimeter. They had this really crappy old Aeroflex cameras, handheld silent cameras, which they'd
Sure, sure.
soundproofed. And I was like, I explained to them, well, I know you release on 16. Back then, they released on 16 millimeter.
Yeah,
Forgive me if this is too deep technically, but it's an important thing. And I said, why don't you guys shoot in 35 millimeter? Because the quality is, even if you're releasing on 16, you do reduction prints. The look is way better. The physics of
sure.
the optics are totally different on 35 than 16. And so then I found out, they said, oh, well, we can't shoot on 35 because the film stock that they were mandated to shoot on, the 16 millimeter film stock, had been canceled by Kodak. And so Hubbard had put out a flurry of documents about Kodak, about what a bunch of criminals they were.
Oh yeah,
So these poor people. And the thing is, Kodak had released another 16 millimeter stock that was superior, but it didn't matter because it was Ron's favorite stock. So, but they still made that stock the one that they'd canceled, they still made it in 35. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful stock. I mean, it was used to shoot The Godfather and all kinds of other very
I know.
classic
Hubbard,
films.
once he got a bug up his ass about something, that was it. Fucking tear the building down. Like there was
Oh
no,
yeah, and I
there was
mean
no,
he,
again, no evolving,
yeah,
no moving forward. It
yeah,
was like, we're doing
yeah,
this,
he wrote some
you know.
incredible. He wrote advice to Eastman Kodak, like as if he was the god of the entire
Right.
world.
As if he was
Like
the
he wrote
expert.
them advice, yeah, telling them
Hmm.
what to do. I mean,
Yeah.
I think they posted those somewhere with like a clown face or
I'm
something.
sure I'm
But
sure it's still
but
there.
but you know, by the time so we switched, I got them to switch to Kodak film. I got them to switch to 35. Eventually, they realized that it was not efficient to be renting 35 millimeter cameras, so they bought the first Area 535 that anybody bought, which is a legendary camera. It was used for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Um, and they sent this 15-year-old girl with a check. Somebody drove her to Burbank to the Airflix headquarters with a check for $350,000, right, to walk in and buy this camera. So nobody buys cameras. The studios lease them.
Yeah.
Like
No,
the
no, no.
only
Everything
reason,
has to be the orgs. It has to be theirs
yeah,
so they can tinker with it and do all the things. But also, then
yeah,
that's a reason for them to charge more money, right? Like when they bought all those Fakakta printing presses for Bridge so that everything was printed in-house. We're binding it. We're doing all this stuff. And so one time somebody was like, well, the books cost more now because we bought all these machines to do it. And I said, oh, okay, well, how much were the machines and how many did you buy? So they told me. And so we did the math and I was like, well, how many books have you sold? And then they told me and I was like, aren't those machines paid for now? Like, why are we still talking about the price of the machines? You've already paid for them.
yeah, yeah,
Now
yeah.
you
No,
could,
they're,
like, they
yeah,
paid for
no, they're,
themselves. And now what are you bitching about? They didn't really have an answer for that. And that's the same thing with like
well,
any equipment and stuff. It's like the reason why it costs more. Like that pays for itself eventually,
yeah, yeah. I mean, in their minds, and I think they really believe this. The idea of the cost of the equipment. I think of that as a concept.
Sure.
Cost of equipment. Then that becomes a sellable commodity. I can
Right.
sell the cost of the equipment over and over again. Doesn't matter if the equipment's paid for, because I've seen that with fundraising, and
Mm-hmm.
we saw it with the cross on the top of the flag building where
Oh,
they
right.
sold the cost. And then I did an ad before I worked for Gold. I did a PSA
Mm-hmm.
for CCHR, and it only cost like $2,500. We bent over backwards. We did it for no money. But the cost, that production cost, they went to people and said, "How would you like to pay for the ad?" And a bunch of people pay, yeah, here's $2,500. And then they went to somebody else.
Yep.
How would you like to pay for the ad? And in their minds, there was nothing wrong with that because I asked them about that. And the woman who was fundraising said, well, you have to sell them an actual thing. You can't sell them an idea. You have to, you can't say, right, like, help us fight the Sykes, give us money. You have to say, we need, $500 for paper clips.
Yeah.
That's their mindset. It has to be
Yeah.
attached to a thing. So they have to keep it attached to the equipment. So yeah, anyway, we bumped up to 35 millimeter film. We stopped using base talent. We started hiring SAG actors, a lot of whom were Scientologists, and a lot of them
Mm-hmm.
got abused or woke up and left. Then we had to redo them again. And then Miscavige said, no more Scientologists can ever be in our films. Like everybody on the planet can go clear except people in our films because then they'll know how shitty we are. But yeah, it was a bunch of things like that. A
Yeah.
bunch of things. So yeah.
All right. Pepperoni Nips asks, do you all notice the emphasis and importance you put behind job titles when you talk about staff and titles? Not a criticism on my part. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. We've never talked about this, and we're both going, yeah, we do. As a matter of fact, the really scary thing about that is that in Scientology, people are objectified. They are referred to as raw meat. They are referred to as bodies in the shop.
Right.
They
Right.
even staff. Everything that has to move from point A to point B in Scientology is routed.
Mm-hmm.
It's put on
Mm-hmm.
a routing
Mm-hmm.
form. People are routed, packages are routed, doesn't matter, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like,
I mean, there's a post called Body Router. That's
body
somebody's
router.
entire
So,
job is to move bodies in the
yeah,
direction of the org and get them to
yeah.
start.
Get them off the street and into the
Yeah.
test center.
Body
That's
routers.
yeah, the body. I made a film.
Yeah.
The reason I went to the test center to protest when I got, shut down and told to shut up because I was just trying to sell a book. No hard feelings there. But the reason I went down there is because I'd made this film.
No hard feelings, but I'm just going to bring it up for the third time. Okay, keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah. I'm gonna tattoo it on my face.
I mean,
Okay,
but Mitch, in
but
everyone's defense, including mine, you did say, I'm here to just sell my book. And then there was a really long pause. And then you said, I'm just joking. So you kind of
yeah.
created that yourself. Let's be honest. I have
No,
the clip.
yeah, yeah, no, 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 no. I take responsibility for my own contribution to that.
Yeah.
And it was, and I wasn't purposely taking a long time. I'm sure I was just distracted. I was finding my way around YouTube. I never should have turned
Sure,
my
sure,
camera
sure.
on. I literally never should have turned my camera on. It was just really a dumb
Well,
idea. I
you're a
mean,
director. You're behind the camera.
yeah,
Your job was never
exactly.
to be in front.
No,
It's a two
never.
different jobs, guys. It's two different things.
No, it is. Some
Yeah.
people are good at it. Quentin Tarantino is a great director and he's a really solid actor.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
funny.
yeah, some people are good at it. Warren Beatty is good at it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of people that I'm not. I kind of suck as an actor. Um, but I'm really good helping actors, I
Sure.
think. I have
Sure.
I mean some, Michelle Stafford and Jenna Elfman and a bunch of other people the
Fucking
first time they
Michelle
were around.
Stafford, man.
I know. Why don't we talk more about her? She's
We
really
should. We should.
she's
Well, I
kind
could
of,
do a whole stream on just Michelle Stafford. She's a wild one.
yeah, she is. I
She's a
don't
wild one.
dislike Michelle at all.
But I think
Um,
we'll move on from this question. Yes, we noticed the reverence with which we talk about these posts, these imaginary jobs in the
yeah, but
imaginary
there's one
space
more.
navy. You know.
But there's one more aspect of it.
Yeah.
What happens after a while is your identity gets replaced with your post title, especially in this
Correct.
era. Like
Correct.
it's really scary. And so anything that threatens, and I'm saying this because it happened to me personally, anything that threatens production
Mm-hmm.
threatens
Mm-hmm.
a person's post title, and that person can be so dysregulated that they see that threat to production as the same as a physical threat on their body and their identity.
Correct.
And this happened to
Correct.
me once where I told my quote unquote senior I was not doing well. I had a sleep disorder, and I was like, it was really hard for me to work 12 hours a day. And I said, look, I got to go. I'm going to leave a half hour early, right? Because I really got to go. I'm like passing out. This is towards the end. And this
Mm-hmm.
person jumped to the nearest wall phone and called security and said I had just physically assaulted them.
Wow.
So, and then when I thought about that later, I thought, oh, that's because my absence, somebody like Miscavige or somebody could have been calling for me or somebody could have been
Mm-hmm.
asking, where's
Mm-hmm.
Mitch? They'd have to answer up. Oh, I let him go home a half hour early. And then they would be in all kinds of trouble.
Right.
So but even suggesting that they were going to be in that position because I needed to leave was not met with any kind of grace or it was met with, you just attacked me. Fortunately enough,
Yeah.
I got called by like a senior sec checker HCO person, like, hey, what's going on? Fortunately, enough of them know that this person is nutty enough that nothing happened, but literally
Sure.
accused me of physically assaulting them. So this idea of the obsession with the post titles, it goes to the point where it becomes senior. Forgive that phrase, but it becomes senior to your name.
It's
Like
true.
it is
That's
more
very true.
important.
Yeah. No, 100%.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Another question for you here, Mitch. How high did you go up the bridge on the processing side and training side?
Okay, good question. I I got up to OT5 before I went to gold, and then I never did a lick of bridge after that because I wasn't in the Sea Org, but I was with the Sea Org. Okay, and it's very different, but in some ways it's the same. Yeah, so I got up. Yeah, I never did a lick of bridge. Did a bunch of weird courses. I did some other things and training. Auditor training, I trained through level 2, which is where you do confessions, and then I did some staff training and some other things. I did an L and things like that. But basically, I was OT5, and I did auditor training up to class 2, what's called class 2. And but considering that I had to do the technical training films, I studied. Like I would never get a certificate for it, but I had to. Do you remember Method 9 word clearing?
Oh, of course I do.
I know you do. I was being sarcastic.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just the most torturous Method 9 word clearing. So every script for all of those films and every reference that supports that whatever he is in the film. I had to M9 all that stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like it was a massive amount of work and study. So that's what I did, and I'm not ashamed to admit that when I was okay. So when I was on level two, when you finish one of the academy levels, you have to audit somebody. It's like barber college, you give them a bad haircut, but you got to go in there, and, right? So, because
Yeah, at the end
I
of
don't think,
every, guys, just so you know, at the end of every academy level where you're learning the different techniques of auditing, so it's level 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you have, after level 5, you have what's called the St. Hill Special Briefing Course, which is many alphabets long, where you have to audit very specific things and you become a person who's an expert. You become like a professor of Scientology. And then you do class A,
yeah,
which is a whole other thing. But after every single level where you're learning a new skill, you have to do the bad haircut. You got to take somebody in front of you
yeah,
and for
yeah,
real do that skill on that person.
yeah. Do you remember
Yeah.
the phrase for the class six St. Hill Special Briefing Course? The Dukes of the Auditor
The
Elite.
Dukes of the Auditor Elite. My mom was a
Yeah,
class 8, so yeah, she became a Duke first,
yeah,
a
sure, sure.
Dukess.
Yeah, yeah, and then
Yeah,
class five is an internship only, so it's
right.
not really a. But when I did level two, you have to do a confessional at the end, which is it's a really soft sec check. It's not hardcore like what we would
Oh
call the
no,
Joburg. Yeah, it's
you
very
just
soft.
have to
And then at
prove you
the
can
end,
get questions answered and that you're going to get people to tell you crimes,
yeah,
light
but
things, diet things.
even on level two professionally, the confessional it's pretty gentle, and
Sure.
and and yeah, and nothing is actionable. You're not going to get in trouble for anything you said.
No.
And at the end of it, you're going to get forgiven because they want you to finish it so you can move on to your next level. So I came time that I had to do a confessional with somebody, and they said, "Look, we've got a 10-year-old kid here. He was about 10." They said he's been in a lot of trouble. He's been truant. He's been cutting school and all this stuff, and he needs a confessional. So I did a confessional on this. Oh my God, it broke my heart. Um, because I knew there was nothing abusive about this confessional. There was nothing weird or sexual about any of the questions. It was kind of like things, have you ever pretended you were sick to get out of school? It was very age appropriate. It's not a child's sec check, it's a confessional. But the thing that broke my heart about it is as I was doing this, it became so apparent that none of the problems he was having were going to be solved by this confessional. He was being like left alone too much of the time because his parents were in Scientology. He was like a latchkey kid. So that I always remember that when I think back, like that child's needs were in no way met by the fact that I did the confessional on him, and I really tried to do a decent job because I almost stopped a couple of times just to give the kid a hug. I mean, my kids, I didn't have kids yet, but I really felt a strong connection with children, and I wanted to stop and say, just give him a hug, go buy him an ice cream because it was just like, you know what I'm saying? Oh, you're muted. Somehow you got muted. I can't hear you.
Hey,
I
I
can't hear
muted
you.
myself. I was doing my inhaler, guys, because I'm having asthma. But I
Yeah, you
forgot to
okay?
unmute
Okay.
my mic.
Yeah, it's okay. That's
It's all right.
that's why we're live. Yeah, we're all
No,
here.
it's
Okay, let's move
live.
on,
It's
shall we?
live.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, the children's stuff is always super hard to bear. It's
yeah,
super hard
yeah.
to wrap your mind around. So the people who didn't have a problem with and there were plenty of people who didn't have a problem giving it to
No,
kids. They had no qualms. They didn't give two shits how old a person was. They were
yeah,
going to get these nasty
yeah,
questions answered because they
yeah,
were
yeah.
reading on the meter. But yeah, it's always
Well,
hard.
and I think the other way around when you have kids like teenage girls who
Hmm.
have been trained and are put in the position of having to audit, a grown ass male adult like me. I mean, that happened to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
I've talked about that a lot. That I was sec checked by Marty Rathman's 14-year-old protege. Well, she
Right.
had an earpiece in her ear, and he's screaming his obscenities at her to
Oh,
ask me these
sure.
questions that are just so profane. I mean, they shouldn't never happen in the presence of a child. And
No.
even then, I was accused of participating in. the sexual abuse, the essay of a child. That is verbal essay, which is of a
Sure.
minor, which is a felony, right? You don't have to touch a child to commit an essay felony. You can do it with just a verbal assault,
Sure.
and unfortunately, that's happened a lot. So
Yeah. I mean, and this is the thing why, so many of us who grew up in Scientology, especially those of who were trained as children to audit, to perform these interrogations, um, and things like that, are so vehement, and correctly so, about not
right,
allowing that to happen to any other children now, because a child, it is a form, it's not a form of, it is child abuse, right?
right,
To
right,
have
absolutely,
um, kids put in that position to be made to ask those questions of adults, or conversely to be asked those questions by adults or even another child, um, is abusive. There's no two ways about it. And that's one of the main points about Scientology, about why it's so dangerous, is that it's not just
right,
the corruption of your mind and things like that, but it is this SA aspect that
right,
happens verbally, as you're pointing out, but also,
right,
let's face it,
right.
also actually, to too many people inside that organization. And then of course it's handled with auditing and not handled with the authorities and people going to jail. But yeah.
Yeah, it's handled with ethics and auditing. And let's
Correct.
face it. Let's face it. Let's just say there was a technology on Earth that could actually, within a matter of hours, rehabilitate a criminal and make victims okay. That would be
That
wonderful.
would be fucking
Like
great. I think we would all sign
that
up for
would be
that.
great.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah, but
anybody would
yeah,
not sign up for that, right?
right.
But
But the
that's
fact
not
of
what Scientology does. I mean, we
no,
can both agree
you
on
have
that. Yeah.
yeah. The fact is, you have an organization that professes that as a truth, as at the
Sure.
core of its belief system. And
Sure.
when it fails to happen, it commits crimes to cover it up.
Correct. 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 All right. The next one is
Yeah,
for me, from One Love
great.
51,000. Nora, do you think your dad would have been attracted to Scientology if he hadn't come from the Vietnam experience? Um, that is a great question. I'm going to say this. My dad had a lot of mental health issues that weren't just, frankly, about Scientology, right? And Vietnam. Prior, his childhood was filled with different traumas that already put him on a path of kind of very narcissistic, very kind of con man esque uh, pathway for him. So my personal belief is, if he would have been introduced to Scientology in the same way that he was, minus Vietnam, which was his best friend finding out about it and telling him about it as like groovy place and there's hot chicks and blah blah blah. Yes, absolutely, my dad would have fallen into Scientology because of everything else that had happened in his childhood. He was not mentally well, and then then he went to Vietnam, got that experience, which was horrific, fell into Scientology, and then later on, got a traumatic brain injury from a solo car crash, which made it worse. His devotion and things to that. So, yeah, I mean, unfortunately for my dad, he was ripe for Scientology for a multitude of reasons that didn't just have to do with Vietnam, but that didn't help. That didn't help.
Yeah.
Peter Anderson wants to know, and I think this is sort of like a rhetorical question, but I'm not sure. So
Okay.
Sea Org that had a child were expected to offer their child to the Sea Org. So Sea Org equals indentured servant with billion-year term, but actually slavery, which also enslaves the child. I think that's a good summation of the
Sure.
viewpoint of
Yeah.
people who were in the Sea Org at that time, because yes, it was absolutely expected that your kid was going into this machine with you.
Well,
So
if I could add to that,
yeah,
if I could add,
please.
you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just make one short statement. Arthur Hubbard, who at one time was a close friend of mine, told me that when he was 8 years old on the ship and
Hmm.
everybody needed to join the Sea Org, the only reason he joined because he thought he was going to lose his family.
Hmm.
Like
Right.
he thought that was it. If I don't join, I'm kicked off the ship and I have no more family. So
Where
that's
would he
a little
go?
bit of. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So of course
But
he's
see,
going
and
to
that's
change.
what
So
a lot of SO kids had to face. They were like,
yeah,
I don't even know my
yeah,
grandparents. I don't know my aunties and
yeah,
uncles. All I know is my parents and these kids that I grew up with. They didn't even,
yeah.
most of them weren't
And
even
the
aware they
ethic,
had other family.
yeah, and the ethics officer, they know him
Right.
too.
Oh,
That person.
yes,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
well. Everybody knew the
yeah,
ethics officer.
yeah.
Yeah, nobody liked. I feel. Listen, a shout out to all of the people who were ever in the Sierra Grande staff at one time and held that job of the Master at Arms, the MAA, the ethics officer, because um, that's a lot to recover from. I mean, honestly, you
Yeah,
did a lot of shit. You know, you were
yeah,
fucking terror
yeah,
to everybody, but also you're
yeah,
still a human being. And I really
yeah.
hope, especially people who held positions like that, seek out some form of therapy because that's a lot to digest and unpack. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
I would venture to speculate that the vast majority of people who leave Scientology and really are not able to overcome their problems is because they were ethics officers. That would be really the most difficult to come back
Oh,
from.
yeah. Oh, 100%. Or somebody who was
Yeah.
like a senior sec checker. You know what I mean? Like that
Yeah,
all they did all
exactly.
day was confessionals. You know, like
Yeah,
those two positions, I think in particular, um, were very evil in their nature,
yeah,
and
right.
also the easiest for people to lose complete sight of their own humanity, like just, you know, in terms of that.
Yeah, but
And
if you're out
you
there
know,
and you had that job, there's also hope. I don't want to paint a
no,
picture of
that's what I'm
hopelessness
saying.
for
I really
anybody.
hope that they
Yeah,
can
yeah, no,
release
you're right.
themselves from a bit of that, seek out the therapy, you know, work up to, you know, apologizing or taking responsibility for, you know,
Right,
the especially horrific things that they participated in, to the specific individuals that occurred with, you know, because that goes a long way. It really goes a long way to be able to tell somebody, hey, I did this. I, you know, and I know how it affected you. I remember X, Y, and Z, and you know the consequences that happened to you. I want to apologize because I set that in motion. Like I cannot tell you the
right,
the absolute healing that comes through that. Like I want to shout out an example. Like when Mike Brown and Lara had their
right,
discussion, right? That was, if you guys have never seen that live between Mike Brown and Lara FM, they interacted in a very negative way during their times in the cadet org. Okay. And Lara was extremely holding on to a lot of anger and upset and hurt from that time, still, even now,
right,
and had
right.
never talked directly to Mike about the specific things that had gone on. And Mike did something that I haven't seen a lot of people who've been in that type of position of power do, is that he literally just held space for her in that interview and allowed her to release this hurt that was inside of her, and he acknowledged it and he apologized for it. He didn't make excuses for it. He really listened. And I admire
Yeah.
him so much for that conversation, because
Mhm.
those are the type of conversations that they don't necessarily have to all be on the internet, because that's a lot. Okay.
Right.
But those are the type of conversations that ex-Scientologists, ex-cult members in general really need the opportunity to have when both participants are willing. Okay, because that's important. To heal, right? Because that is
Mhm.
part of the healing process, to be able
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
say, I was hurt and this specific thing hurt me, and have that person who hurt you hear that and then go, oh, I I am so sorry that I hurt you in that moment, you know, and just like
Right.
really have that loving kind of caring moment. You know, I think is super important, you know, because it's very hard to heal from cults in general, to even realize you were in one, to, you know, disabuse yourself of these ideas that run our lives, run every second of your life just automatically.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
important. It's important to be able to kind of get that out, you know, which I think this is how I went into this conversation with us. We had some conflict. We've, you know, and
Right.
he, you know, do I think I'm solving the entire generational gap between Gen X and boomers right now and healing everyone? Absolutely not. That's impossible. Right. But I feel like the closer we can bring the understanding together, our mutual understanding, right? That's the important part, is that it's baby steps. It's all baby steps
Right. Right.
towards like a total understanding, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
This is a good one. So, Mitch, do you think that you've overcome a lot of the trauma leaving Scientology created for you? That's the question. I always enjoy watching your conversation. So, do you think you've overcome a lot of the trauma leaving Scientology that was created for you, or where are you at in the overcoming the trauma? Would you say?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know
I mean,
because I know I
let's refresh the
documented.
audience. You left the int base what year? You
I think
stopped
the
going.
last time, yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. The last time I went there it was lockdown. When was that? February
2020.
2020?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
February? Yeah, that's
Okay.
the last time I was there.
And then when
I
did
was
you?
literally I
Yeah.
was literally on a location scout in San Diego with a
Wow.
bunch of staff members. You only need 4 people to go on a location scout,
Right.
but they have these 15 passenger vans, and because all the staff up there hate being there, the
Right.
entire
They're
crew
like,
would be go,
I'm
I
gonna
need to be
go.
there.
Right.
Yeah, I'm the props person, but I need to go on the look. And then, everybody, so they load up a van with like 10 people, which is
Yeah.
always just, they were all wearing the sandwich lady gloves by that time, and they were all wearing masks. And then they all had beepers or cell phones, right? And all of a sudden we were in San Diego, and, I thought I was going back to gold that day, right? And everybody got the same message: drive Mitch home, come back to the base. Like, they're done. That was the day when, the NFL and the NBA and everybody was shutting down and everything was, they're like, and then they basically said to me, look, if you want to keep working with us, you're going to have to come and stay here until the pandemic's over. And I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do that. And they respected that. So I just never went back. And then I did some writing jobs for them a little bit into
Mm-hmm.
2021. And then I was just done. So I started speaking out. I didn't actually start speaking out until, I think it was the winter of 2021.
Okay.
I was pretty traumatized for that first year. I didn't get
Well,
off my
yeah.
sofa. Played video games for 12 hours a day. It was either that or, um,
I mean, the pandemic was
uh,
hard. I mean, let's just face it. The pandemic sucked for everybody. It was awful.
oh,
It
it was
was.
great for me. I got to
Well,
stop
you got out of
interacting with
Scientology. I mean, like, hey,
me,
great timing.
Catherine Olson. A ton of people got out. Lots of public just said, this kind of feels good not to interact with them anymore. I
Right.
mean, between the pandemic was a major factor in the decline of Scientology. People
Oh
don't give it
yeah.
enough
They
credit.
couldn't demand that
Um,
everybody was gathering and all this stuff, even though they're a religion, because
yeah,
religious people violated that, and then all of a sudden their whole choir's dead. And so even the
yeah,
religions were like, oh shit, we can't like fucking get together. I mean, that happened here in Oregon, where like it was like right at the beginning of the pandemic, this like little tiny, Christian church. They were like, oh, we're fine, we're all Christians, we prayed about it. And they went in, they did their choir practice, and like within a week, almost everybody in the choir was dead because they all got like the first round of COVID, and the
yeah,
hospitals were
yeah,
cramped. It was a whole, and they were all
yeah.
elderly too, so they had pre-existing conditions. It was a whole.
Right,
It was really
right.
bad. I mean, it was horrific. I mean, that was like that people really got in more fear. Like, oh my god, I took out a
Yeah,
choir. Like
yeah,
so. Yeah,
yeah.
no, but so basically, I mean, what I want to point out to this person and to the audience so that they understand, like, I left in my last day inside a church actively doing stuff was in 2002. Okay, November of 2002. That's 22 years ago, and
Right.
you've been out of Scientology essentially mentally now for like basically 3 years, right?
No, so for about 15 years, because I was really pulling myself out for years and years and years. I just didn't know how to leave.
I see, but you know what I mean by like mentally,
Yeah, I
like where
do.
you're
I know
you're not
100%.
doing the
I
things
know
daily
100%.
and stuff like that. Like,
It took about it. Yeah, it took about 8 months for when my phone rang that my heart didn't jump out of my throat.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I had a friend, an actor that I worked with, who was a special Green Beret. He was original Green Beret, and would go into North Vietnam and run these assassination missions and bring back the head of a political or military
Oh
leader. It
sure.
was really scary stuff. He told me it took. He was from a wealthy family that had a big place in Connecticut. His backyard was a forest. He told me it took him 10 years before he could walk on his own property and not look for tripwires. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of these kind of triggers. For me, it was the telephone. That was my tripwire. You need to get up here right now. And every time my phone would ring, I go, right?
Yeah.
And so that took about 6 or 8 months for that to stop. But I think it deserves more of an answer than I don't know. I mean, do you ever listen to Dr. K, the healthy gamer on YouTube? He's got a couple million
No.
followers.
No. No.
He's one of the best mental health spokespersons.
Okay.
Very interesting guy. He used to be a monk. I'll put a link in my on my channel.
Okay.
He used to be a he was a he had a gaming addiction, doing really bad in life. He was like, screw this, and he went and became a monk, a Hindu or Buddhist or something. And then he went, okay, good. And then he went to medical school and
Had
he
enough
became a
time to calm
psychiatrist.
down.
Yeah, and then he said, I'm really interested in the human
Yeah.
condition. He went to medical school and became a psychiatrist, right? And he's got a couple million followers on Twitch.
Wow.
He's got a couple million followers on YouTube. I mean, Dr. K is huge, and he does a lot of great content. And he did a stream one day, and this is my point. It's about a thing called shit life syndrome, right? And when he was an intern at a psychiatric hospital, he was doing rounds, and this nurse, there was a guy that was particularly dysregulated, not doing well, and so he asked her, "What's wrong with him?" And she said, "Oh, he has shit life syndrome." Right?
Mm,
And she's like, "What's that?" He said, "Well, just a lot of bad things happen to somebody, whatever they are, divorces, they get fired, they lose people, they start feeling bad, they get diagnosed, they get prescribed. That doesn't work. They get prescribed with more, they get prescribed with more. And then after a while, they just have shit life syndrome. You could give these people any amount of therapy, it's not going to help because the conditions in their life have to help." And he did a really incredible stream on this. So I
mm.
still do have shit life syndrome. Okay, my whole point, because I struggle for work. I experience a lot of depression, but it's situational. Like, I don't have depression, I have despair
Right.
because I spent so long, and now I had to trade all of that security, and even with all of the horribleness that came with it. I don't know where I'm going to be living next month. I don't know where my next job's coming from. There's just a lot of really shitty things. Is that the trauma from Scientology? I think the trauma from Scientology prevented me from really addressing that on an immediate basis. You know, I, I remember getting a message from somebody that said, I was in Scientology for, I don't know, 16 years. I was on staff for this number of years. I was in the Sea Org, and I left and I had no problem. Like, I didn't experience all this bad stuff people talk about. And I said, well, I wrote them back and I said, look, I have a question for you. What did you leave into? Did you leave into community? Did you leave into financial security? Did you have family that took care of you? And they were like, yes, 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 yes. So sometimes we lose track of the fact that it's not what we left isn't the only thing that traumatizes us. It's what we left into.
Right.
And when you leave into, you're estranged from your family, you have no work, you have limited funds, you haven't paid your taxes in years, because of all of that, and you don't have friends, you don't have a community, you don't have any of that. You're leaving into a situation that is a desperate situation. Like, it's very, a person's situation after leaving something like Scientology is is predicated as much on what they leave into
Hmm.
as what they leave behind. Some people, they leave the Sea Org, they stay in the community, they get jobs from other Scientologists, they keep quiet about their actual mindset, they sort of gradiently move out. Or,
Hmm.
you do what I did, you just leave, you just jump out of the airplane. As I used to say, I feel like I jumped out of an airplane with a sewing kit and an armful of silk. Now I'm going to see if I can sew a parachute before I
Right.
hit the ground. And
Right.
folks, I'm going to tell you, the ground is really close. So, you
Yeah.
know, is it trauma or shit life syndrome? I guess
That's a good
yeah,
question. That's a good question to
yeah,
ask everybody. Ask yourself on a daily basis. All right.
yeah.
I'm guys. I'm letting you know. I'm not gonna. We're not gonna get to every question, but I'm gonna pick out some important ones here. Cute Steffi wants to know, Magnificent Mitch, do you have a particular goal or wish
Oh,
you would like to see
thank you.
come to fruition by, let's say, Thursday, 2 p.m. in September 2027? 3 years. What
Yeah,
would bring you
well,
great joy?
well, one of the things. Thank you. Thank you for that question. I really appreciate that. One, I'm going to be 75 on September 26th, which just blows my mind. So we could make it September 26th in 3 years. That would be on a birthday. I know when I left Scientology, and I really looked, and I felt so betrayed, and I felt so stupid because for so many years I was willing to accept so much harm in the name of the world becoming a less harmful place. Like, this is just a tragedy because all of us, and I think you would agree with this, we thought we were doing something to make the world a place that was less harmful.
Yeah.
But in order to accomplish that, all we were doing was committing harm. So I kind of made this I kind of made this oath to myself that I want to spend the rest of my life doing things that lessen harm,
Mm.
right? Like that are just neutral. So I'm involved in some projects. I'm not going to talk about it, but because I'm superstition. I don't want to jinx it, but I'm
Well,
involved in some
no, it's in
projects that are,
development. It's not, it's better
yeah,
to not, then people
yeah,
put too much input
yeah.
into it.
Well, I don't want any feedback. Yeah, but they're projects that are definitely if they work, people would consider them a benefit and not a detriment. So that's kind of like whatever it is, I would just like to be involved in something still on a creative level, whether it's writing or directing or whatever,
Yeah.
uh, or writing and directing, um, that somehow contributes to lessening the harm in the world. So that would be
I
my
feel
dream.
you on that.
And
I want
just
to make an impact
yeah,
too that's real,
yeah,
because we were told we were doing all this stuff, and that was one of the first things that cracked
yeah,
for me was looking around the world after I had left and
yeah,
realizing I wasted those 8 fucking years thinking I was saving all these people, and it was a fucking lie. Like, I was so mad. I'm still
yeah,
mad. I'm still mad that all that effort and the passion that I had for the earth and humanity was
yeah.
usurped by a fucking
But
cult that
yeah,
lied to
and it
me,
doesn't go away. Your idealism doesn't go away.
No, no,
It's
no.
part
But
of you.
like
So
I felt like such a failure and a fake.
yeah,
Like it just was like, well, then I can't. What am I going to do now? Like, no one's going to believe me. I was in this cult. Like, who am I?
yeah,
And that took a
yeah,
long time to get over that sort of idea.
yeah,
That I
yeah.
had nothing to give because I had given everything to something that has literally done the opposite of everything I thought. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, that resonates with me. And I also left. I stayed way too long. I mean, I stayed way after the interaction that was demanded of me became very uncomfortable. I
Mm,
stayed after I'd seen the kind of abuse that just made my head explode
mm,
because I didn't want to be unemployed. I didn't. You hear these
yeah.
things. Soldiers in battle say, why were you fighting? And they say, I was fighting for the guy next to me. And
Right.
so there were, not for the ideals of the country. And there were a lot of young people younger than me certainly, that were really dependent on me and the films we made and da, da, da,
Mm-hmm,
da. And I was
mm-hmm,
like, their world is just going to turn to shit if I leave and all this
mm-hmm.
crazy stuff that keeps you there and you don't realize it. But it's almost like a form of self-harm that the compartmentalization and the cognitive dissonance that the mental and emotional pretzel you have to twist yourself
Yeah.
into, it's like you don't realize it, but you're like cutting yourself.
Yeah.
You're like literally because people that cut themselves, they have some horrible emotional pain and they want to supplant it with a physical pain.
Right.
And the mental gyrations you put through to stay in the situation are like they're like a form of you're harming yourself when you do that
Mm-hmm.
and you don't even realize it. So
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge part of the
I think
recovery.
I think I'm gonna ask the audience. You tell me how much of the trauma you think I got over because sometimes I don't know.
Put it. I'll scroll to the
No,
end
no,
at the end
Don,
here. We'll
I
see.
don't want to.
No, I'm just
Yeah, I
kidding.
don't want to.
How
But
healed are we? Like, it's a new game show
yeah,
for
exactly.
ex cult members.
Exactly.
How
Yeah,
healed
how
are
healed?
you? like,
Yeah, am I very healed? Am I sane as a
like,
little
I mean, here's
healed?
the deal, guys. I told you yesterday. Okay, because I've done the shots. I've done a lot of intensive therapy. And when I was doing the intensive therapy at the beginning of the year, I was not in a good mental state. I was in a very bad mental state, which is why I was in the intensive outpatient therapy. Um, and
Mm,
so I was in therapy 5 days a week doing a group
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and all the individual classes. And
mm-hmm,
it saved my life. It was amazing. But one group in particular it's called, I have the workbook still, Healing from Trauma. Okay.
mm-hmm.
And I talked to my psychiatrist at my checkup and I told him all the great things, and I've gotten the shots now, and I'm able to process things completely differently. And I asked him, can I please redo the healing from trauma group? Like, can I? And then Danny Mustard's like, oh, you're retreading? And I was like, yes, I'm retreading this course. But which was hilarious. But I wanted to redo this, not because I didn't heal from some trauma, but the information, particularly in this group therapy, and there's like all kinds of worksheets and stuff that obviously I filled out the first time, is so good. But I know I got like 2% of it. Right. I got enough of it at the
Right.
time to be like, okay, things are getting like tiny bit better. Right. That I want to really, now that I can more analytically examine trauma, I want to be able to have the tools under my belt to like really do that. Right. So I would say that healing from this, unfortunately, but also fortunately, is a never ending process. You're going to keep getting better and better and better. So some people will be like, oh, well, fuck it. That's like, it's forever. I don't want to do that. But also the flip side of that coin is that everything incrementally, daily, hourly, weekly, improves for yourself, right? And it is a never-ending process. Like even if you and I had never done Scientology, okay, like let's say that had not touched us in some way, every human on earth encounters difficult situations, different traumas, different things. We've all been through group trauma as a society, 9/11, the Cold War, all these other things that we still need to heal from, and then our own individual things, right? So the ability to understand that and unlock your own natural, ability to move forward and let that go is so important for anybody's survival, not just, people from extremely high control mindfuck groups like Scientology,
Yeah, no, everything you're saying, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know if you ever feel this way, but
Mm,
sometimes because I've had people ask me, so how are you doing with that? Do you feel healthy or whatever? And I said, well,
sure.
honestly, I think I might be healthier. I think I might be emotionally healthier than a lot of people that are just kind of sleepwalking through life
Sure.
because I meet it's not a benefit, but one of the advantages of the experience that we had is that it's that idea. I hate to use a Scientology term, but I want
Sure.
to talk to you about this, like which Scientology terms we want to keep
I
because
want to
they're
keep
actually
Dev T.
really
Dev T is at the
Dev
top of my,
T
I
number
fucking
one,
love Dev
number
T.
one,
It's
number
right.
one,
It is a great term. But anyway, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, no, but I know. We should maybe do a survey amongst ex-Scientologists. Like, if you could keep three terms, which terms would, I mean, I don't want to keep
Yeah.
any of it because I think it's all radioactive, but there's a
Yeah.
few that I wish we could take over, like Dev T.
Sure.
But the concept of necessity level, right? This is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
an idea in Scientology that it's kind of like there's an analogy about a guy in Dianetics being chased by a bear,
Right.
right? And so he has this reactive mind, which let's just say is a stand-in for all of his problems and trauma. And
Sure.
boy, when that guy's being chased by the bear, his reactive mind goes away and he goes into survival mode
Right.
because his necessity level comes up. That's not a wrong concept at all. And I think a lot of us, because of what happened, we had a very high, we're either going to succumb or we're going to start getting better. And so
Yeah.
we have a very high necessity level. I know it wasn't that long that I was seeking out a therapist after I left,
Mm.
and then, you go through 4 or 5 or 6, whatever is the average that you go through before you find someone.
Totally.
But so many people I know, they're fine with their junk. It's like not really bothering them that much. They don't,
But see, they're not
you know
though.
what I'm
I mean,
saying?
and
I don't,
that's the sad news is that
I
they're
know
not
they're
fine
not.
with their junk, but it's an acceptable normal that
Yeah,
this junk inhibits them and that they are somehow eking out success, right? Like they have money, they have shelter, they don't
right.
have these other problems that maybe you or I have, right? So they think I'm doing fine. But the truth of the matter is that the reality of the situation is for everybody. This is a total generality for every human on planet Earth. But until you sit down and address the problems, the real problems, the trauma, the incidences of, extreme impact that you've had
Right.
in your life as a human, right? And really learn what happened to you in those moments, right? They are going to continue fucking you up. They are going to keep
Yeah.
slapping you in the face, whether you're asking
Right.
them to or not. And it's a hard lesson to learn because a lot of people, they don't want to talk about themselves. They don't want to talk
No.
about what they don't want to talk about, because as long as they keep it over here in the box, right? It's just on the
Hmm.
shelf back
Hmm.
there, then they're fine. And that's what we all do. We all naturally
Yeah.
compartmentalize things. We just,
Yeah,
okay,
for
that one,
sure.
we're going to put it in a little teacup, boop, goes on the shelf, and we don't talk about the teacup, and then I'm okay. As long as the teacup doesn't start shaking or fall off the shelf, I'm good. And that's a natural human response to, shit, to the bags of shit
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we
I
get
mean,
thrown on us,
yeah,
But it's like this idea about therapy, and I try to emphasize that a lot, exactly what you said, that if you go to therapy for the first time and it's fucked up and this person's not listening to you and they're just trying to like overwhelm you with stuff, you have the power, unlike Scientology and other high control groups, to be like, thank you so much. This was great, but I'm out, and just get another therapist. You could even walk out of the session. You don't have to stay, right?
right,
You
right,
can,
right.
like, this is the place where you truly have autonomy. I've gone through, I think, this almost a similar number to you of therapists, and I finally found like the chupacabra of therapists for me.
Yeah, yeah,
And she's fantastic, and she gets me. She also doesn't let me get away with my shit, because I was upfront with her. I was like, hey, I just got diagnosed with ADHD, and so I mask a lot of my trauma with humor.
hmm,
So like,
hmm,
even if you ask me if I'm good, I'm like, oh yeah, everything's great. Like, that's my normal
yeah,
answer. I'm not, it will take me a lot to be like, I'm fucking like in a hole right now. So, you have to really also, it's
yeah.
giving a little vulnerability and trust to that person. And if they carry you, right, they don't just drop the baby, and they carry you once you've given them that, then I would say stick with that person. But, also, there's so many kinds of therapy. Like, this healing from trauma is group therapy. I love group therapy. And that's a great place to start too, for people, if you're really scared of just like that one-on-one intimacy, because it's very intimate to talk to like
Yeah,
just one person.
yeah, I think there was a little bit of a revolution in the people ascribing to therapy during the pandemic, because
Hmm.
everybody became used to doing things remotely. I've done
Yeah.
all of my therapy stuff remotely,
Yeah.
and it was kind of like easier. You didn't have to get dressed and drive to an office and then drive home.
Just
And
put on a nice shirt on
no,
top and be in your jammies
yeah,
on the bottom.
yeah, or not, yeah, at most. Yeah, because by the time you're done driving to the office and driving home, you've spent two times the time.
Right. And you're
So yeah,
re-traumatized because
it's
traffic sucks. Like, let's face it. You're like,
yeah,
ah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And if you have shit life syndrome,
Yeah.
you're already, you're already like just probably taking the
I
bus to
mean,
the
the only
therapist.
exception for me is that I go to my therapy in person now, but I drive like 40 minutes one way, and I go to a ranch, and there's horses, and they're getting some goats soon. There's like little barn kittens. So I get to touch all these animals while I'm walking around this beautiful ranch with my therapist, talking about all my
Well,
problems.
that's yeah,
So it's
yeah, of
like,
course. Well, that's
it's
different.
it's amazing.
That's
It's
that's
amazing.
that's different than
Yeah.
driving to an office in Beverly
Yeah.
Hills and having a
Right.
valet take your car. It's just like,
Yeah,
or
no,
what,
that's,
or
yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
whatever all those rich people do with their
Right.
therapy.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They get to lie. Those are
Anyway,
the lying on the couch people. Those I've never done that.
yeah, yeah. One thing I was really hung up on for a while was trying to find somebody who specialized in cultic abuse,
Yeah.
or
Hmm.
specifically Scientology.
There's like
There
five
was,
people. There's like,
yeah, there's like nobody. And so then I kind of got over that. So I
yeah.
had to have a lot of talks with my
It,
therapist
and I
about
think this is
Scientology.
an obsession with ex Scientologists. I'm just going to call us all out here, that we want, because most of us have read Big League
Yeah,
Sales. Okay. So we consider ourselves in this moment professional buyers, right? We're the top. So
right,
we only
right,
want the real deal. If we're going to go to therapy, it's going to
right,
be the guy. We're going to go see fucking Deepak Chopra, or something, to go, and he's going to fix us. Right. Like,
right.
it's ridiculous, because I was really fixated on that too at first. Like, this person has to know everything about Scientology. They have to understand it. They have to do all these things. And in fact, when I talked to a therapist that did know a little bit about Scientology, that was one of my worst therapists.
Mm,
Because then it just became like, this person was not good at not othering me a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, then I
sure,
became like
sure.
a
Yeah.
sideshow circus freak. And, something would happen with Tom Cruise in the news, and that would be like the start of our session. Like, oh, did you hear
Oh,
about Tom Cruise? And I'm like,
Oh my
I don't.
God. Yeah,
Okay, I'm out.
I'm
I'm
here
out.
to talk about. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I just, and I'm sure you did too, but I did a ton of reading. I mean, I read
Oh,
so many books on cultic
thousands.
abuse, relational
Buddhism,
abuse. Yeah, and a
self-help.
lot. Since you mentioned it, I noticed there's a lot of contemporary techniques, therapies, which are very centered in Eastern thought,
Correct.
which
Mindfulness
just
is
delight.
basically the,
Yeah,
yeah, it's the
my, I,
Americanization
well, I
of
thought that was a brand
meditation.
of yoga pants. No, sorry. I thought mindfulness was a brand of yoga pants. Sorry. No, I always
There
just
probably is
delighted
a
me when
brand of
that.
yoga pants called mindfulness, let's
Yeah,
be
no,
honest.
when the concept of mindfulness got branded with the yoga
Right.
people, I was just like
Oh
because
yeah,
that's certainly not what it is.
that's your first reaction. But one of the first things I dove into after leaving was Buddhism. And I went and saw the Dalai
Yeah.
Lama speak.
Oh wow.
I read like books about all the different types of Buddhism.
Mm. Hmm.
My
Hmm.
favorite author was Brad Warner. He's an American Buddhist monk. And like one of
Sure.
his
Yeah.
second book is called Don't Be a Jerk. No, actually, the second one is Sit Down and Shut Up. And so he talks about it in a way that I was like, oh, okay. He's like, his first one is very much about like punk being he was a punk rocker. And then he
Mm.
just got into Buddhism around the early 80s and like went to Japan and studied. I mean, like the
Wow.
whole shebang, right? And so, he's done a deep dive into Buddhism and studied under a great master and things like that. But what I found about it is like even I found a little freedom in it that like I'm reading about the multiple types of Buddhism. And then I realized like, oh, okay. So meditation, they want you to sit in front of a blank wall and they want you to just stare at it, just stare at this wall. And I was like, I can't fucking do that. That's like a patter drill on steroids. Like I'm going to freak the
Yeah.
fuck out.
Yeah.
And then I remember reading the story about Buddha, right? Like that all the things he went through. And of course, Keanu Reeves does a great movie about that if you want to just watch the diet version. But there's but when he discovered enlightenment after this long journey of being an ascetic monk and all this stuff, he sat his ass down underneath a plum tree in India and he just observed what was. And that was when I
Right.
realized, okay, I'm going to play with this a little bit. Like I went to the beach
Right.
near where I lived and I just sat down on this like small dune and I just looked out at the ocean. From where I was in Ventura, I could see all the way out to the San Nicolas Islands right there.
Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
was just like observing the waves, observing, the horizon in the distance and all these things. And I was like, oh, like I don't have to sit and hit a bowl and do the singing bowl and light incense. Like
Right.
this
Right.
is meditation. And it was like the first bit of freedom that I had in terms of like trying to be religious, because in Scientology, you can't just be like, you know what? If I'm going to learn this, the way I learn is I'm like a visual learner. So I want to go see the film where they talk about the tone scale 300 times. And that's going to help me to remember all these stupid tones instead of sitting in front of a wall
Sure.
being like, tone 40, serenity of beingness. And then like just trying to like say
Right.
it. Like, it was like, oh, like I can choose how I practice this meditation, and now I've tried other things like guided meditations. The app I've talked about a lot called Luminate, which is like you put on headphones and then use the flashlight of your phone and it flashes lights and plays like this beautiful music. And you end up seeing, like, for anybody out there who has taken LSD, it is a bit like you see patterns and colors and it's so beautiful. Like I was like, if this is what taking LSD is like, I get it. Like it's gorgeous and calming, just very calming. So like it's those little tiny acts of rebellion, which like it wasn't like the Dalai Lama was like, I saw that. Like, like and now I can't
Yeah.
ever,
Yeah.
say that I practice Buddhism, right? Because it's okay. It's like, it's okay however you do it, wherever you meditate. I mean, even
Hmm.
Thich Nhat Hanh wrote the whole Pieces Every Step as an example, where he taught people walking meditations, or like, hey, you're driving your car, you're at a stoplight, like do a few breaths and, focus on being here now, and it's like, oh, these things can grow and change, but Scientology doesn't. And that's the first, I think, you get real freedom and you start breaking free of the, like, the stark really strictness of it. You know what I mean?
I do. Hey, let me
Yeah.
ask you, did you
Sure.
ever listen to or read Alan Watts?
I don't know who that is. I don't think so.
Oh, Alan Watts. Just ironically, before I got into Scientology when I was a teenager, I was reading and listening to Alan Watts.
Mm.
He's a British guy. He's dead. The reason that we know about Buddhism in the West is because of Alan Watts.
Oh, okay.
He's the one that
Okay.
he's the one who popularized it.
I'll have to
And
I'll have to
he
check him
did.
out.
Yeah, check it out. There's actually some people have taken some of parts of his speeches and made videos on
Mm.
YouTube. But he was actually a British Lutheran minister who then became a Buddhist monk and
Interesting.
then started lecturing in the 50s and 60s. He started lecturing about Buddhism, and he's the one who brought it to the West.
Wow.
I'm surprised that anyway. I highly recommend it. And then he's also been commercialized a little bit because some of his
Mm.
messages are so wonderful.
Sure.
He did this lecture once about how you're a little kid and you're supposed to reach for school, and then you finish high school, you have to reach for college, then you have to reach for a job, and then you have to reach for a family, and then you have to do that. He said, when do you stop and live your life? And he did this whole thing about it, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
beautiful. And so Volvo, and this is on YouTube, you can watch it. They took like a minute or two of that. They turned it into the most spectacular ad saying, no, you get one of our station wagons, you load it up with surfboards and canoes and camping gear or whatever, and you go off and live your life. But, and I had taken, long before that ad was doing, because I'm a big Alan Watts fan, I had taken some of his stuff and used
Mm.
it for Dianetics ads and Scientology ads because I couldn't find anything that Hubbard ever said. I got to grab Weston real quick.
Okay, grab Weston. And then we have another hot button question for you when you come back here, Mitch. It's a quick commercial break, guys. I've run out of my regular water.
Okay, guys, I'm back.
Okay, good.
Hey,
Because we're
Weston.
getting spicy. I'm switching from flat to sparkling water here, so please hold.
Oh, yeah, nice.
There we go.
Here,
Got
I'll
my
take a
Topo
drink with
Chico.
you. Oh,
All
nice.
right.
One of my favorites. Cheers.
Cheers. Bing. I get the lime Topo Chico. It's so good. It's like perfect.
Yeah, I'm going to try that. I buy Topo Chico. I mean, like I buy it by the
I
case.
get it from Amazon Fresh. They deliver it to the house. It's just the Topo Chico twist of lime. It's so good
Yeah,
because it's
I've
just a
yeah,
tiny bit of flavor in it.
yeah, it's my favorite carbonated water.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. If you guys don't know what Topo Chico is, please do yourself a favor. Go to your local grocery store, get some Topo. This chat brought to you by Topo Chico. I wish.
Yeah,
But like
yeah,
seriously,
exactly.
get Topo Chico. Call me. Anyway,
Yeah,
so the question is,
yeah. Go
Mitch,
ahead.
okay, this is a spicy one. I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
All right. Do you see the kids that the parents hand over their legal rights to? The kids in the Seer as being okay. This is a two-parter. Second part is, as well, how do you feel about these youngsters practicing Scientology? So first part, do you think that it was okay that parents signed over their legal rights to their children going into the Sea Org? And second part, how do you feel about kids basically doing Scientology?
No, and no kid should do it. Can we move on?
There we go. Okay.
Because I've answered these questions like 1,000
No,
times, and
I
I've
know. It's
spoken
just,
about
it
these.
is a question. So,
And there's
hi,
a little bit.
Marilyn.
I just yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
We'll go on.
I
No
was
is a
gonna
fine
yeah
answer. We don't even have
yeah
to belabor it. The
no
answer is no.
yeah
That's fine.
yeah.
Marilyn says, hi, Nora and Mitch. Hi, Marilyn. Thank you for having these conversations. What do you think it will take for Congress to hold a congressional hearing on Scientology's tax exempt status?
Pressure from constituents. A lot of pressure from constituents.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you want to be bugging somebody daily, don't bug law enforcement. Bug the Congress.
Yeah.
I wrote to my
Bug your
congressman the other
mayor,
day.
bug your city council,
Yeah,
bug your state
and
Congress,
tell
the
them.
national Congress, everybody from the bottom up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a little bit of in a fluid situation right now, which is a little crisis stressful. And when I can stabilize that stuff, I'm definitely going to start some kind of, I'm going to be a little more aggressive with the campaign. But because
Mhm.
there's language you can use, they don't follow public policy.
Correct.
They've got all these lawsuits and all these other things going on, and
Right.
one of the whole rationales of them being tax exempt is that they exist for the public good, which is, inside of all these ideal orgs, they have the new civilization, as they call them, new civilization builders,
Yeah.
which is part of the public. Yeah, yeah, new civilization, all right, where you're
Yeah.
broke, we got your money, and if you don't like it, you just did it wrong.
Yeah.
So there's the fact that that stuff is fake. They're not really, they have
Yeah.
all the what they call the SBCs, the social betterment corporations. They have, Crimenon, Narconon, Blaise Scholastics, volunteer ministers,
Hmm.
Way to Happiness, blah blah
Used
blah,
for
and
human
all this stuff.
rights. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have all kinds of, they give away these free, which they give a lot of them away free.
Oh yeah.
But they make Scientologists buy them, and they give them away free,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But they have these educator kits that talk about drugs and literacy, and they
Hmm.
have conference rooms and film rooms, and they let local groups come in and use them. They do all this for PR. And then
Yeah.
they can point to that and say, no, we have a community center. We're here for the public good. We're
Right.
running an anti-drug campaign. So the Congress needs to be alerted to that stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's why
it's
I've personally
on.
asked for the protesters to start focusing not just on Big Blue and the other buildings like that, but like, let's get to fucking Glendale and do a protest in front of the Way to Happiness Foundation,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
And how about
Like,
this? How about this? How about this? Maybe
yeah,
somebody should start saying it's a cult, it's a cult, it's a cult, and your tax dollars are underwriting it.
yeah. Your
Because,
tax
like, let's
dollars are
add
paying for these buildings. Yeah,
yeah. So as a way of connecting the public, because they're like they don't give
100%.
a shit. They're going to
100%.
sidestep. Yeah, they're just going to sidestep in and go, oh look, there are some people, and they're angry at these people. I see that shit on TV all the time. I don't care, but
Right.
just the idea that this is what your tax dollars pay for. This is fake, and your tax dollars are paying for it. People
And
are
make sure they know
hypersensitive.
what city council members, what mayors and things like that are letting that happen. Karen Bass, and things like that
Yeah,
in LA.
exactly, exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
like,
And what's his name? Adam Schiff, who's he's a
yeah,
corporate liberal and blah blah blah. I mean,
he's met with Davey. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but
Fuck that
Adam
guy.
Schiff, he's the congressperson
Hmm.
for the district where the Way to Happiness headquarters
Correct.
is.
Correct.
So
Yeah. So
yeah,
these are the
so
key things. And I know that resources are coming in terms of here's the people to write to, because I know that as a human, we can all Google this, but it is confusing and it's very hard sometimes, even on the congressional websites, to find the address to send mail to or the actual number to call, because it's not,
yeah,
they don't make it as easy.
yeah,
So we're working on resources, guys. Those will be pumped out because we need massive campaign. We need a massive campaign.
yeah. And
Scientology.
if I could just
Oh, go ahead.
if I
Go
could
ahead.
just say one thing to the protesters, just leave room on that sign so you can write, and your tax dollars are paying for it.
Yeah,
That's all.
that's a good
That's
suggestion. That's a good suggestion. All right. Scientology Triggers asks, Mitch, did you ever get in ethics trouble? Have you done conditions? No,
again
Mitch
one.
was an angel.
Yeah, I was a golden boy. I was really well liked. Um, yeah, yeah. That's why I left, because eventually I just got so there's a journalist who worked for Freedom Magazine, which I don't know if your supporters understand in the Scientology world the importance of Freedom Magazine, but and the fact that there has been no Freedom Magazine since 2019. They haven't been able to put one out because all of the journalists that they hired to work on it, they all quit, except for one who's worried about his green card. I mean, just the fact that I know that, and Osa is listening and knows that I know that guy is only staying because of his green card. They're like, oh my God, how does he know that? Yeah, I know a lot of stuff. Four of them left. Two of the key ones have spoken to me. I'm not going to mention their names.
No, that's okay.
One of them, who worked for OSA for 10 years, because Freedom is part of OSA. It's
Hmm.
it's the socially conscious. They've actually been recognized for doing some good journalism in the past. They've done things on droughts in California and da da da. But over the years, Miscavige turned it into just like a hate piece against his enemies.
Hmm.
But one of these journalists told me the reason he left is shortly after I was booted up to gold because I was in so much ethics trouble for being a naughty boy. And no naughty people allowed in Scientology, right?
No.
Uh, And God forbid any of your naughtiness might be connected as a trauma response,
Right.
because, Scientology meets trauma with ethics. Like if you're traumatized, you're in ethics trouble.
Mm-hmm.
It's the
Mm-hmm.
weirdest thing. They took this guy into the basement, this journalist of Scientology Media Productions, because that's where HCO is. Like the course rooms in HCO and a bunch of sec check rooms. Like if you got sec check in SMP, you went into the basement. The idea was, no windows and stuffy. Uh, and basically this little Lebensborn, I looked that up, the Lebensborn, those were Third Reich children who were chosen and raised by the SS. They were
Oh,
called the
I didn't know that.
Lebensborn.
Lebensborn. Okay.
Yeah, Lebensborn. I think it's Lebensborn.
Oh,
If you ever
okay.
saw the TV version of Philip K. Dick's Man in the High Castle,
Mm,
they were featured in there, the little children that grew up.
okay.
So Miscavige has his Lebensborn at Flag.
Right.
The SS raised HCO, and then that's who they sent to SMP. And these people are really nasty. They took this guy, not a Scientologist. They were starting to require these professional journalists who weren't Scientologists to be subjected to weekly sec checks.
Mm,
Like it was just unbelievable. And they took this guy into the basement and they said to him, well, I'm not going to get into the whole story. We can at some point. It's just too long of why
yeah.
they took him down there. But they basically said, if you don't comply, we're going to do to you what we did to Mitch Brisker. And that's when he left. And they handed him my comment. And they said, read this, which was all a bunch of lies and bullshit
Of
anyway.
course, it's always a bunch of
Yeah.
nonsense, trash, made up shit.
So towards the end, I got in a lot of ethics trouble. I mean, for years and years and years, I couldn't really get into much. I used to joke that, if I had, kidnapped a bus of blind orphans and addicted them to heroin and drove the bus off a cliff, I'd still be qualified because they needed somebody with my
Oh
skills
yeah,
so
they don't
badly.
care.
Like, yeah, it just wouldn't have mattered. But eventually, and also I couldn't get in too much ethics trouble because I was needed to work. Like if I was like, no, you're going to go off and you're going to be in a sec check and you're going to be doing an ethics program for the next month, 60 people would have been out of work. So
Yeah,
it was just kind of like, okay, whatever, slap on the hand, go back to work.
yeah,
A very uncomfortable slap on the hand. So, but yeah, I had lots of sec checks. I had a sec check from a 14-year-old girl that was
yeah. And just so you guys remember, Mitch was not a Sea Org member, right? So Mitch was essentially not even a staff member. He was a public, okay,
yeah.
who was hired to do a job. There's only been one public in the history of Scientology that was so criminal that public did the RPF. Okay. And you know who I'm
Really?
talking about? John Woodruff. When he was the
Really?
ED.
I
Yeah.
had
He
no
was, you didn't know
idea.
that? When
Wow.
he was the
Did
ED
not
org,
know that.
they caught him in
Right.
so many financial crimes, guys, that literally if at the time they had turned over what he did financially to that organization, he would be in jail for 30 years in a federal prison
Wow.
because they were federal crimes that he was committing, right? But
Wow.
because we don't want everybody looking at the books of Scientology. We can't have them like investigating all of the fucking finances. They made him do the RPF. He was on the RPF with
That's
SEERG
crazy.
members. Yeah. He's the only
That,
public who's ever done it. And then as soon as he got to whatever point he got to, he was kicked out, like gone. Goodbye.
well, this blows my mind for two reasons. One, John Woodruff was the chaplain at my wedding.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
guys, so just so you know, the Woodruff family is enormous, enormously
Right.
powerful, enormously prolific throughout Scientology.
Yeah.
Shane
Yeah.
Woodruff, who was the chaplain at
Yeah.
CC, right over there, that's one of the Woodruff kids. I say kids like he's my age now, but hugely influential person. His wife, Cassie, was the supercargo at Celebrity Center. And then you have Dan Woodruff, who's a Class 8 auditor, audited a boatload of celebrities. I was on the RPF with Dan. Total sweetheart of a man. I really hope that he escaped or left or something because he was a
Yeah,
good
yeah,
guy.
yeah, yeah. Actually, it was Dan Woodruff.
Was it
He was
Dan?
the taller skin. He
Yes,
was the
Dan's.
taller, skinnier one,
Yes,
right?
Dan. Oh, Dan, and the
Yeah.
dreamy
Okay.
blue eyes. He was very handsome. Dan
Yeah,
Woodruff.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And then we had this custom chaplain shirt made with embroidered crosses, really
Mm-hmm.
super duper. and it was made for the married couple, and so then I grabbed it from Gold and had Dan wear it for the
You grabbed the costume and were like, Dan, put this on.
yeah
Thank you.
yeah put
No,
this
it was a
on,
great,
yeah,
it
it's
was a
from the
great
movie.
costume in the movie. It was a great costume.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, spare no expense. You know, you mentioned the
Yeah,
Proteros film. Oh, I meant to mention this back when
sure,
somebody said,
sure.
"What did you do to make things better?" And I mentioned that I brought in one of the Westmorlands for makeup,
Right.
the head of the family. But we also brought in a lot of other people. Like when I finally Miscavige, you know, everybody in the Proteros film turned out to be an SP, and he had to make it
Oh, it's
over.
so
Well,
strange. Except for
well,
except
not
for Dave
everybody.
himself, who was the cameraman on that. Somehow he escaped from being an SP,
Yeah, well,
but everybody else
and the
was.
guy. Yeah, and the guy who played opposite, um, you know, the lead. Oh
Joe,
God, what kind of? Yeah,
I have to.
he's still at Gold.
Is he
He's still
still at
there. So
Gold? But he got like a disease, right?
yeah,
That changed his skin
yeah,
color.
yeah.
My
He
mom
had
worked
no,
with
not
him at
his.
San Francisco Org. She knew
Yeah,
him
he
from
was at
back in those
AO
days.
for yeah,
Yeah,
he was at AO for a while.
I
He
can't
got
remember
like
his name.
giant. Yeah, I'll think of it. He got a very nice guy. He got giantitis or something. It was a
Yeah,
glandular
yeah.
problem where yeah, and so yeah, he does grounds. He drives a lawnmower up a
Jesus.
pole. But so then everybody knew how shitty that film was. Man, that was the worst film technically ever. But because it was Dan Kuhn was the
Dan
guy who
Kuhn. There
played
we
the
go. Dan Kuhn.
yeah
It would have come to
yeah
us like right at the end.
yeah, and the other guy's name is Waldo.
Waldo.
I
Yes,
can't Waldo. I can't think of his last name.
but that's just
But
yeah,
anyways,
Waldo. Hmm.
yeah, and so everybody had to love this horrible film because it was the only living record of Hubbard having coached people in their TRs. Okay,
Right,
so
and they're awful.
when you awful when you finish a film at Gold, right? They had you probably had these. Remember those SO members had these steamer trunks that you put all your stuff in.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, did you guys have those? So they had those at Gold.
No,
Everybody had like a
we weren't
steamer
cool
trunk.
like that. We just you had to figure it out. I had like a fucking bin that I put my stuff in under my
Well,
bed.
everybody got these big steamer trunks, right? And so then when they were finished with the film, they take all of the what they called Val docs, the valuable documents,
Okay.
the scriptural notes, the camera notes. Back when Hubbard was directing, if people were following around with a microphone, all of those tapes, everything pertinent, valuable to the film, they put it in one of these steamer trunks, and then they put it into a storage archive space, right? And
Mm.
then sometimes if I was going to do a film over that Hubbard did, I'd get a hold of that trunk, I'd open it up, and I'd go through it, and I'd say, "What the hell did they do?" So, and usually they would fill like half to three quarters, maybe full of a steamer trunk. The Proteros film was two steamer trunks.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was a treasure trove. Somebody had followed Hubbard around and recorded all of his directing. And like I think about it now, and it was like
It's like a fever dream, I'm sure. Awful.
yeah, it was crazy. But there's a scene where he has Dan Kuhn in a trailer and
Mm-hmm,
he's
mm-hmm.
coaching him because he's coaching him on doing TRs because his TRs are so bad,
Yeah,
right? Plus his eyes are red because he had this eye disorder. And you know, your eyes, you're an auditor and your eyes are red. You know what that means. Your TRs
yeah.
are out, right? So anyway, eventually this thing was, and I used to say, people would say, "Oh, you did the tech films." I said, "Yeah, I did all of them except for the Proteros film because we're never going to redo that." Miscavige comes to me one day and he says, "Listen, let's just face it. Everybody thinks that film's a piece of shit." Like, whoa, and now you say that. And he says, "We're going to redo it. We got to figure out how to redo it." So I did my own take on it, and then I was a third of the way shooting it. And he's like, "No, let's not do that. It's too different. We still have to keep the schlock. We have to figure out how to make the
Keep the
schlock
camp.
good."
Got to keep the camp in there.
Yeah, well, we didn't put it that way, but it was. So you remember the staff members' costumes? They had these blue Nehru jackets that looked like they were sort of the Star Trek crew from New Delhi. It was just
Oh
really
my
bizarre. And
god.
so I had to keep those. So I hired Colleen Atwood, who's won, I don't know, at least a half a dozen Oscars. She's done every Johnny Depp film.
Sure.
She won an Oscar for Memoirs of a Geisha. Somebody just thanked her in an awards show for some amazing costumes that she did. Oh, it was
Mm-hmm.
on the Tim Burton. She worked with Tim Burton a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I never figured out why Colleen did it. I didn't know her. We wanted to get a top person. We contacted her. I met her at CC. We had a long meeting. So she just did those costumes. and she did an amazing job. But I always thought, so that's another thing that I did to raise the quality is bring in like
Sure.
Oscar level people to handle stuff. And then I hired a girl who did all the students' costumes. And she's a very notable costumer. She'd done like, I don't know, Hot Tub Time Machine and a bunch of very popular films that had, she really knew what she was doing. She
Right.
worked out at Warner Brothers and but I never asked Colleen, like, why the fuck did you take this job for Scientology? Like, I never asked her, but I always thought she'd just done Valkyrie, right?
Oh,
She did
wow.
those costumes
Hmm.
in Valkyrie. So there's a Korean gentleman in North Hollywood who is the number one uniform costumer for Hollywood. In other words, a
Wow.
tailor. He's the guy that's going to he made all the Toms and the top costumes for Valkyrie. And Colleen designed the film. And so I always wondered because I knew she must have had a relationship with Tom somehow
Yeah.
because she designed and had his, right? And I thought, I wonder if she did this because she's thinking, Tom's pretty powerful, and maybe I always thought that it was maybe she did it kind of as a favor to him. I never talked to her about it,
Who know?
but then
Probably.
the guy who made the costumes for Valkyrie, that's who she had made the costumes for the Protears film. So we would try to really upgrade things
Probably the
to a
best
higher level.
quality
Yeah,
anybody
and
ever wore in the history of being in the Sea Org. I can tell you that.
yeah, no kidding. I mean, the wool gabardine. She was on her way to Rome. She was shooting a gangster film with
Mm.
Johnny Depp. 7 o'clock in the morning, she stopped at a fabric store on her way to the airport. She had the fabric store opened in West LA because
Wow.
I knew her so well, and she ran through there. Because we were doing color tests, and so she had to finally pick the right fabric. She ran through there literally going like this, picking fabrics up and just touching them for that long and going, nope, 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 until it's just amazing, to watch these people work. So yeah, we
Hmm.
we did a few things like that, and
Yeah.
we brought up some cameraman, I'm trying to think of his name, Italian guy who was a very famous
Claudio Lugli.
cinematographer. No, no. Well, yeah, he was a customer, but we brought up a cinematographer
Oh,
and some, journeyman lighting people, and I had a guy from 20th Century Fox who was head of the scenic department, and Fox probably has the most famous scenic department. People painting, they don't do that too much anymore because everything's digital, but literally painted scenics, like they probably have the most vast, you know, collection of hand painted scenics that you could rent from Fox. And this guy, this wonderful middle aged gay man who was just so many great stories to tell, and he was the head of the scenic department, came out there and he taught the guys how to paint scenics. Some of those guys have left and they're working in Hollywood as scenic artists and
wow.
making good money, and they have dental health insurance and they have pensions, and so you know
Yeah. That's
anyway, so
awesome.
that's one of the other things that we did to try to upgrade things.
Okay. Well, it was a
But
lot. It was not a little bit. I mean, you basically redid it. But let me
yeah,
look.
it was a lot. But I just want to say that like I know a number of people who went up there, especially actors who worked, and
Sure.
because of what you guys have done in this community, and I say you guys because I'm not that long out, they won't go up there anymore.
That's good.
Like
I'm
I
glad.
made friends with people that were actors, and I've talked to them. They're like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore."
Yeah. It's
It's
not worth the pay. It's not worth it to go
Well, they don't want to
do that.
support it. It pays. It's not terrible if you're doing nothing that day. They'll give you 50
Yeah.
bucks for gas and $200. And if you're kind of a starving artist and you're doing nothing, for a shitty little part of that. For a
Sure.
bigger part, they might pay you differently. I mean, I
Yeah.
hired actors at, a couple of grand a day just because, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
When
Sure.
you need
Sure.
good people, you have to pay for it. But it's just they don't want to support it
Yeah.
even though
No,
they
I
get
appreciate
treated
that.
really well. Yeah, they just don't want to support it. They don't want to tell their friends, yeah, I just did a film for Scientology.
They're not putting that
They
on their
don't, so,
IMDb.
yeah, no kidding. So let's move on, shall
All
we?
right. Fat Grammy. Hi, Mona. Question. As a movie maker, storyline of intent is hugely important. Would you agree that the quote kids is a more straightforward storyline than adding the other crimes Scientology did, which confuses it?
Well, we talked about that the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I made the analogy that like when I was in commercials, and I think this is relevant to all storytelling, that we would joke it's kind of a cheap shot. You put a kid and a puppy in there if you really want to pull at people's heartstrings. So
Right.
in terms of soliciting people's emotional attachment or emotional investment to an issue, kids are gonna, they're gonna trump everything else. But even old people, because the elderly have less of a horizon and are seen in that way to be less valuable. But
Mm-hmm.
that's just in our society.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
other societies, and most notably in societies where people live to be 100 years old, it's the eldest generation that have pinups in the bar, not the young girls.
Right.
So that's very much a Western thing to worship your youth and worship children. But undoubtedly, the answer to that person's question is yes, because nothing is going to tug at your heartstrings more than children put in peril. But
Yeah.
everybody in Scientology is peril. It
Yeah.
is in peril. Even the people that are bubbled and living a privileged life, because eventually there's going to be an accounting.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually they're going to get challenged, and they're going to find out that their mental health is really not in good shape.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to a
So
very good friend yesterday. We were having lunch and we were talking about this particular issue, right?
yeah,
On putting the emphasis. Where do we put the emphasis? Where's the
yeah,
crack? What's the thing that's going to do it? And I said, the problem is that what has happened to kids and their continued indoctrination in Scientology is criminal. It is torture. It is child abuse. There's no question. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But the problem is that if because we were at a restaurant, so I pointed at a random person in the restaurant. I said, okay, let's say that lady is an undercover FBI agent, and she walks
right,
into an org, okay, and she sees children doing TRs, children doing the objectives, mild auditing, walking back and forth, and doing the drills with dolls and things like that. That person with no knowledge of Scientology, just observation skills, is going to see children just behaving well and doing these
yeah,
things that, unless you have the visceral knowledge of what that is like
yeah,
on the outside surface, that looks like, okay, I don't what's the fucking big deal, right? But that same observer, okay, who's in law enforcement or whatever, sees someone your age, okay, and oftentimes older, Mitch, carrying 3 boxes at once, or being like hunched over and like being made to do manual labor, physical hard, like the guy who came and did the spraying on the sidewalk, right? To
hmm
get rid of the chalk art, and these people are disheveled. They're not well taken care of, right? Um, you know, that is something that is easier to see, and then also easier to investigate a little bit, because now you have this old person who you take them aside and say, oh, you've worked here for 20 years. Okay, fantastic. Da, 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 da. But yet you see they have a house loan and they have other stuff, and you find out they don't live in that place and all these other things. It's easier to investigate and
yeah,
find evidence of the
hmm
elder abuse in some ways. It doesn't mean that the child abuse doesn't exist and that it's not rampant and that it's not important and it should fucking stop because it's
yeah,
illegal. But in
yeah,
terms of bringing a case in an immediate action for the law enforcement, what can they see? They're going to see it in a totally different light unless we sit down and give every single one of these law enforcement people, a fucking crash course in Scientology, right? Because a court of law also has to be able to prove these things, right?
right.
Now, our
That's
testimony, our
that's the
individual
real
testimony,
point.
will give to that. Well, it's emotional, it's real, it's visceral. We went through these things. The policy of Scientology itself is incriminating, and how to deal with
hmm
kids and how to do all that stuff. But what somebody can walk in and observe, you know, uh, doesn't pan out in the same way,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
right.
with the kids. And I wish it did. I wish that it would. And I am still 100% kids cannot consent. And I think we should keep bringing up the kids as an issue because it keeps it in the forefront. But for me, if I was, trying to, as Scientology would say, deliver an effective blow, coming at it from possibly a different angle, which will free the children, may be necessary, but also I'm not an expert on it. Like I could be completely off my rocker, but that's what I'm trying to look at is like how a random law enforcement person who's like, oh, we got to shut this shit down could go in and observe and notate and bring then to the rest of the justice system to get things going, because that's where it's going to count. And that's why also what we talked about earlier, writing to our local governments, to our state governments, to the federal government about these front groups, that is where they're infiltrating children the most across the board, right? Because let's face it, there aren't very many Scientologists left, right? But their reach is huge because of the front groups, because of, there's Fakakta TV station and all this other stuff, right? And they're really trying to have this foothold on foreign language speaking people here in America, but also around the world. So if we can knock them out here in America, other countries aren't going to put up with it because they put up with it because it's American, right?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, it just comes back to, I think we need to get past, and my point was there's a broader conversation to have. That's your point as well.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying de-emphasize the kids just because when you walk in the org, it's not obvious that a law's been broken.
Right.
But it's difficult because, our Hasidic children being abused because they're being indoctrinated into this very...
I mean, that's a debate. That's a debate. It's very restrictive.
Our Christian children being abused because they're being taught that girls need to bring their rapist children to term.
Right.
I don't want to do the trauma Olympics thing, but the best way to connect the public is to point out these things and to point out the fact that their tax dollars are underwriting it. I really do believe that. And I also have to say, to some degree, I mean, it's not a monolith. Just like with, let's say, fundamentalist evangelical Christians. Let's say evangelical Christians, born again Christians, who they're one issue voters. They'll come out for abortion, right? Trump knew that. And he exploited that. Scientologists are one issue voters. They'll come out to vote against anybody they become convinced is pro-psych, right? They'll always come out to vote for that. But it's not a monolith. I mean, you have evangelicals. This is not a political statement, but you take somebody like Jimmy Carter, who was dedicated to probably the most good human we ever had as president. He might have been a shitty president, but he was such a good human. Dedicated a life of public service. Yeah, left office, and instead of bass fishing and playing golf, he went and built, houses for homeless people.
Still building houses.
Yeah,
man's at 96.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you have evangelical Christians like that on one end, and the other end of the spectrum, you have evangelical Christians that are blowing up abortion clinics.
Correct.
So there's a spectrum, and it's the same as Scientology. You kind of get clobbered in this community for saying, well, there's some Scientologists that are really well-meaning and they're trying to do good things. And at least in the short term, not everybody's outcomes are bad. I mean, I had a friend, obviously they're not my friend anymore. They were very busy, in their career. And they went they'd always go to these like Haiti, these VM things. And it actually really meant a lot to them. They really wanted to go down there and help. And this particular person was like, doing touch assist and handing out water didn't seem like much. So she tried to get in and help the doctors with injured people. And they said, well, you don't have a certification. So she went and got certified. She went to nursing school.
I love it.
So she could go. So, I mean, there's some people that are just such good-hearted people. I don't know what she and her husband are still doing in Scientology. Their offspring is out, is gay, is tattooed, doesn't speak out about Scientology, but she's really a very talented counterculture individual. I'm like, why are you guys still there? I don't talk to them anymore. But it's not a monolith. You mostly have people in Scientology that are blowing up abortion clinics. They're mostly on that side
100%,
of the spectrum.
100%.
Yeah, but you have some people that are more like Jimmy Carter, and they're trying to actually do something good.
Well, they just still believe the original mission, that they're helping all mankind, that they're making the world a better place.
They haven't observed or experienced enough abuse yet for them to wake up, and
they're not looking. Just like my mom didn't look. My mom wasn't looking at the things, and it's easy to not look when you don't want to talk or look about at
Well,
that thing,
It's also easy not to look when you're being sec checked twice a year
Correct.
on your next level, and
Right.
you're going to be adding $10,000 or $20,000 worth of auditing if you go, yeah, I was checking some things out on the internet. And also, these people, like the person I'm referring to, they're part of the elite class. They're
Correct.
part of the heavily bubbled, way up the
Mm-hmm.
bridge, give lots of money,
Yeah.
right? They're not a
They get
member
a
of
lot
the.
of privilege for what they do, so that they don't
Yeah,
feel
yeah, and they
pain in
don't.
the same way that the poors do.
Yeah,
I mean, let's
exactly.
be
And they
honest.
don't
Yeah.
know that there's elderly people living in bunk beds
No.
stacked four high
No.
in rooms without proper ventilation, and they're
No.
being exploited. They don't know any of that stuff. And they wouldn't believe it if you told them. They literally would never believe it. It's my feeling that until people experience just they either observe or personally experience enough of the bullshit that they actually go, wait a minute, whoa, something's wrong here.
Right.
And it's really because their body is screaming at them. No, no. It's not
Yeah.
even, I think it starts as a physical thing. It's not even mental. I know for me, it was just feeling sick all the time and not sleeping. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. For
anyway,
sure.
so I said my bit, but
All right. So
but
power.
you're absolutely right. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. We'll get another question in here. Powerlize to Paralyze wants to know, can we depend on you both to take up and converse about difficult issues in the community? You've proven it's doable and have done something very helpful by talking. Thank you. So this is
I mean,
they're asking for a commitment from us to
yeah,
discuss. I mean,
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. Can we depend on you? That sounds a lot
I
like,
mean, here's the deal. We're trying our. I mean, in this moment, I can commit to that. I mean, here's the other thing, though, guys. I know that this community is can be fucking really messy, right? Because it always has been. The ex cult, ex Scientology community, but particularly the ex Scientology community, is always been a fucking mess, and that is because we are extremely traumatized people. There's groups of people that come out of Scientology and they're like, I'm never doing therapy. They're never going to talk about it, but they're just going to bitch a lot about things that happened and then disagree with everybody, right? And then there's a group of
right?
people that really dive into the trauma and try to like heal from it and do a lot of therapy. So those two groups clash a lot because it's like, hey, you're, pointing at you, you fucking did this stuff. So the problem is that like, I'll look at my own evolution. Like I started out really fucking rageful, just like a absolute ball of rage and oh, my phone is everything's dying. Just I every interaction I had online was essentially a street fight. Like I was ready to just knock people out, just punch them the fuck out about everything because I felt so wronged. I felt so beat up and hurt by Scientology that everybody who was just making any excuse for Ron, any excuse for the time period, like, fuck you, like, you don't know what you're talking about, right? And so over time, I've softened, and that was also really hard, especially talking to my mom about that. There's lots of things we haven't talked about, me and my mom, but like that was a whole evolution too, to kind of give her grace. And that's something I'm still working on, giving people grace for things that enrage me. But that's really part of the problem because it's hard. Believe it or not, guys, it's really hard for ex-Scientologists to talk to each other because we trigger each other a lot with our verbiage, with our state of being, with all these things, right? Because Scientology itself really fucked up communication for us
Yeah,
in a
I mean,
kind of like bad way. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I do know exactly what you mean. I think that's even more of a liability in this context of
Mm-hmm.
us
Mm-hmm.
talk like you and I have never met in person. I hope we do someday. My sister lives in Corvallis. I hope to get up there to see her.
Oh yeah,
I'll
that's a great town. It's
definitely
beautiful.
stop. Yeah, definitely stop by and see you.
Yeah,
So,
I'm only like an
but I
hour
mean,
from
I do.
Corvallis. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Corvallis is like an hour from everything, right? It's just like,
Pretty,
I
it's
mean,
kind of like
it's
right
not
in the
close to
middle.
it,
It's, yeah,
but it's not close to anything. It's
no,
always at least an hour away.
it's not.
Um, yeah, but I mean, I do have friends, people that I worked with at the international base that I feel very close, that I don't have any problem talking to.
Hmm.
Um, I do have friends from that we don't trigger each other, and we have really good conversations that we kind of need, because some of us, what we experienced was like, ugh, like nobody else is going to get it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because we were, so it's kind of like this very, at the same time, I've made the mistake of going, you have to give me some clout because I have this experience, which is a huge mistake. I don't. I'm very humble about having been put in that position because I was a very unlikely individual to be put in that position. But yeah, that is very true. But I think I do have some friendships of people I was able to reunite with who also left that are really special friends. So
Yeah. No, for sure. For
yeah,
sure. Yeah. I think that's important too. This is a good question from Pinche Becky. Hi, Pinche Becky. As a Neverin, I want
Pinche
to know.
Becky.
I know, I love that name. Uh,
I love that.
as a Neverin,
I think anything with Pinche in the beginning of it is
Pinche.
just
Yeah, I
on.
know. Like, it's such
Yeah,
a great swear word. I appreciate it.
yeah.
As an Neverin, I want to know, how can I help to end elder and child abuse in Scientology? Where do you suggest that I start?
Well, we've talked about some things. Most of it is a local matter, unless you know that there's been cross state or out of country trafficking. And there's another
Right.
thing. Okay, so then there's uh, just informing, writing KRs, right? We're basically talking about using their satellites against them, interacting with law enforcement or whoever. Uh, the other thing is we should maybe show this now. I sent it to you, that
Oh,
link.
yeah. Let me
I
pull
did
it up
not
on the
I
screen
did
here.
not yeah, I did not know about this, but here's another angle, and this is something I want to become more involved in as soon as I can get things sorted out a little bit. Somebody after our last stream, and one of the nice things about doing a positive stream is people start reaching out to you
Yeah.
with really good suggestions, mostly good, some are not good. Um, so let me see if you find that thing. So anyway,
Yeah,
somebody
it's
sent
here.
this
It's
thing to
up
me.
on the screen. Do you want me to read it out?
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, because I don't see the same screen you did.
Yeah. So I
Uh,
have it up on the screen for everybody there.
okay, great. So here's the deal. We all know about the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which was, yeah, all of us in Scientology certainly know about it,
Right.
which was an origination of what's her name? Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt. Oh, my brain. Uh, And then Hubbard wrote this thing, and he said the UN is a corrupt organization. They don't even believe in their own stuff. So we're going to take over this Declaration of Human
We're
Rights,
going to
and
do it
we'll be the
better.
ones. Yeah, we'll push it. We'll push it, and then we'll look good. And
Hmm.
then a woman by the name of Mary Shuttleworth, who's a medal winner, she invented the Youth for Human Rights movement.
Right.
And so we all know all about this, but there's this other thing. Go ahead, put it up.
It's
And
up
if,
there.
oh, it is up. Sorry. Yeah. Scroll to the top so people can see
Sure.
the name of it.
This is the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, but this is the Convention on the Rights of the Child from 20th of November, 1989.
Yeah, and so I had no idea that this even existed. Now, keep in mind, this does not have the force of law, right? The UN, like none of this stuff, the UN doesn't go around and arrest people because they're violating human rights. But they do, they do these resolutions where they say this organization is an evil organization and they're guilty of the
Mhm.
following. And then that is something you can then carry forth in terms of making sure everybody sees that. Like then they become branded. Now, I think one of the dangers of this is exactly the kind of thing that um, it's the kind of thing that the church would use to
Mhm.
say, "Look, we're following this," right? So I was hesitant to say this because I'm not trying to give them good ideas, but they don't take good advice anyway, right? They're not going to take
Right.
it.
No.
But this is a thing. So many of us. Go ahead now. Read Article 14. Now that we've said that.
Sure. So Article 14 says, one, states parties shall respect the right of the child to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Number two, states parties shall respect the rights and duties of the parents and, when applicable, legal guardians to provide direction to the child in the exercise of his or her right in a manner consistent with the evolving capacities of the child. And number 3, freedom to manifest one's religion or beliefs may be subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law and are necessary to protect public safety, order, health, and morals, or the fundamental rights and freedoms of others.
Yeah, there you go. So how many of us have stories of how the Church of Scientology violates Article 14 of the
Mm-hmm.
United Nations Declaration of the Rights of a Child?
I
And
mean, it's
shouldn't we
basically the
all,
whole thing.
yeah, the whole thing, it's all right there. So
Yeah.
shouldn't we all, I'm going to do this, we should all be writing letters and telling our stories to the High Commissioner and see if we can't get the UN to pass a
Hey.
resolution that Scientology is in violation of this, and
Yeah.
and then there goes their Youth for Human Rights campaign.
Right?
Like,
No,
it's
like this is
over.
what I'm
It's
saying. We have to
done.
knock down all of the chess pieces because it's not,
Yeah.
and I again, I just refer to myself. When I first started speaking out, I really thought that my story on the RPF, which was similar, less and sometimes more than other people that had experienced the RPF, but that it was so graphic and so terrible that that would bring down Scientology. Okay. Not because I'm special, but because other people were suffering through the RPF as well. Right. And also the addition, like, hey, I'm gay and this is what happened. Right.
Right.
Crickets. I mean, I got on some
Right.
national news. I got on some international news. There were articles written and there was a flurry for like about 6 months. And I thought, I'm going to do it. Right. Then it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's because it doesn't let you know, and for a long time, then I went into like a whole fucking mental health shame spiral about how I'm, all these things about myself, right? Just went really bad.
Right.
But
Right.
what I know now is that every single one of these horror stories, okay, that happened to real people that I know, some I don't know, these survivors of this horrific trauma, these stories matter, and accompanied with the truth of their, survival. Okay, we have to have exactly that. We need the letters, the writing, the contacting, the calling of every single official out there that we can about the true nature and like the deviousness of Scientology and how they insert themselves in all these things, because that's the only way it's going to be brought down, because our stories are kind of like what kicks the door open. It makes people listen because they're like, oh, wow, that is crazy. And then you can get in the rest of the stuff about how we take it down and what all they're doing. Right. And so
Yeah.
people
I mean,
speaking out is still important. I still, everybody who comes forward to tell their story is fucking brave. And thank you for having done it. It's just, we need all
yeah.
of that.
I don't know who the U.S. ambassador to the UN is, but I would definitely target that person with as many letters as they could possibly get. I'll put a link. We'll both put links to this
That
website
is
so
Linda
people can
Thomas
visit it.
Greenfield.
Okay.
I'm going to bring her
Well,
up here. I'll bring her up on that. I just Googled it.
yeah.
The power of Google.
And
But yeah, this is her, Linda Thomas Greenfield. She is the United States ambassador to the United Nations. Let me see if I can. Oh, that's a Zoom, Nora. That's wrong. Here we go.
And so she would be somebody to definitely communicate with about this. It's just one prong. And I think there needs to be a lot of different. I mean, somebody pointed out in the chat that the UNRC is different than the Human Rights Charter. Yes, it is, but it's still the UN, and it's specifically aimed at children.
Yeah, she's on Twitter, she's on X, and she's on Facebook. So I'm just going to pull all those up here. I'll place these links into because oftentimes people's social media managers are, because there's no email listed there on her profile here. But she's active on Twitter. She has her Twitter feed up here. I'll put the Facebook. I'll put all these links in the chat here. So if you guys want to, reach out and touch somebody in your favorite social media, please do. There's the Facebook. I'll put these all up. But this is like, I mean, guys, let's
Great,
face it. It's
great.
2024. People respond to their social media because that is seen by millions of people versus an email, right? Because there's pressure there. If you're doing it in a public forum, versus, just emailing them, they can just send you a form letter back and then, call it a day kind of a situation,
Yeah, great. Thank you for posting those links. So
Yeah.
that's something you can do. You can spend 10 minutes making some posts to this individual and pointing out Article 14 and how it's continuously violated by the True Scientology. The violations are actually embedded in the core belief system. And, maybe we can get some traction so that, it would be great if they would, issue one of these proclamations or resolutions that they do about some country or organization being a human rights violator. So, maybe we could see something like that happen.
Some of these questions are funny. Some of these questions are, this is a ridiculous question. Okay, here's a fun one. I'll get to the other one that made me cackle there in a second. Okay, Mitch. So this is a question for both of us. What do you consider the best film exposing Scientology to be?
Right. The best film
that exposed Scientology.
No, I hear you. I'm thinking. Well, that would have to be the Going Clear film. I can't think of another one. I mean, I didn't think that the Master was such a it was such a allegorical. I mean, I
watched that
watched
with my mom, and she was still very much in Scientology, and she just sat there like in fucking. She's like, I hate Philip Thomas Anderson. Never watch another film of this. And I was like thinking in my mind, oh, did he nail it a little too much on the head for you? Like,
yeah.
But I mean, that one it was very much art. It was very much art. A lot of looseness was done, but fucking, I'm sorry. Philip Seymour Hoffman, R.I.P. So fucking good as the Hubbard character. So good.
I mean, I hate to say this, but I tried to watch it while I was in Scientology, and I was in this period where.
That's rebellious.
No, I was in this. It was towards the end, and I was in this period where I was trying to find a wedge to pound. Help me, convince me, show me. So I watched like 15 minutes of it. I just didn't think it was a good film. I thought it was really. I'll probably watch the whole thing soday, but I thought it was a little.
And let's be honest, there haven't been a lot of films exposing Scientology. To be honest, there's been a lot of news stories over the years, a lot of in-depth specials from 60 Minutes America and 60 Minutes Australia. Leah's show, of course, is a series, which was fantastic. Going Clear, I loved it and I hated it. I loved it, and I still think if somebody wants to understand the essence and the basics of Scientology, it's a fantastic film, visually stunning. Alex Gibney is a great filmmaker. But I hated it because it left so much out, and they did not interview one from this specific perspective, one kid growing up in Scientology. And I was pissed at Lawrence Wright too, because it's not in his book either. And when I saw the film at LACMA, when it premiered at LACMA before it went to the theaters, Alex Gibney and Lawrence Wright were there, and I walked right up to the two of them. I'm like, bro, where's my story? Where is the story of me, of growing up in Scientology and being sucked into the cult and all this stuff? And then Alex Gibney looked at me and he goes, why don't you make that film? And I was like, fuck you.
That's like a Scientology thing to say. I hate to point it out. No, you recognize a problem, then you need to fix it.
Like you didn't. Where's the part 2? Do a follow-up. Go interview. You interviewed all these very key people, Lawrence, for your book. Good job. But now do a part 2 and follow up with the kids who were fucking born into this shit, right? And also there was nothing on the RPF, which I, of course, was obsessed with at the time, and I was pissed. So, yeah. But I would say I still, out of all the films, I like it better than Louis Theroux's film, which is just to make fun of it. And I don't appreciate it. I don't, as an ex-Scientologist, I don't appreciate that.
Louis Theroux's his take on Miscavige and was
It's
like
great.
amazing.
Well,
It
that's
was so
because he had
crazy.
Marty sitting right there before Marty lost his mind and
Right,
went back to
right.
tell the real
No,
stories of
hold
Miscavige.
on. Hold on, fact check. Marty never went back. He never went back to Scientology. They won't let Marty 1,000 miles from a Scientology building. He went. He agreed to take a check. No, I was there. I
No,
saw the
that's
whole
what I'm
thing
saying.
happen.
That's what I mean by he's back. Oh no, they're not
Yeah,
going to
I
let him
know,
on a
but
base. He's
yeah,
back
no,
in the
but
fold.
you said the same thing Miscavige said.
Yeah,
He's back. I mean, that's
yeah,
what he said. He walked into the conference room at S&P. A few of
yeah.
us were sitting there, and he said Marty's back, and I immediately knew what he meant.
He's back
He
on the
didn't
side of
mean.
Scientology.
Yeah, well, he's
Yeah,
back on the side of Marty. He never left the side of Marty, but now
he's
he's
back on the side of
agreed to take it.
Miscavige. Yeah.
He's agreed not he's agreed to take a check,
Yeah.
call up a lawsuit,
In the
and
same way that Debbie
Miscavige.
Cook did. In the same way that Debbie
Yeah,
Cook
but
did.
except that Miscavige said to Marty, and this is my conjecture, but there's no way you're going to change my mind. He said, and all those people that you worked with to say nasty things about us, you're going to make videos against
Oh,
them.
I'm
And Marty
sure.
was
I'm
like,
sure that was a quid pro
oh yeah,
quo for all the
yeah, but
zeros on that check.
also Marty was such an egomaniac
Uh huh. Yeah.
that this gave him some spotlight. So he's like,
Oh, sure.
cool, I'll do it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
Then he got to
that's
talk
just
more about stuff that he thinks he's a fucking expert on, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Don't get me
first of all,
started about
just
Marty.
just real
I knew
quickly,
Marty really
Marty
well.
never stopped being a Scientologist, not for 1 second. He left. He
Yeah,
he opened up his own shop, started auditing people.
yeah,
Okay, and then
yeah.
got into a situation where he became this expert on Scientology. Went
Right,
around the media circuit
right,
talking
right,
about
right.
Scientology. Right, Landon, come take this dog out, please. And then then when shit hit the fan, which, Scientology arranged to fuck over his wife to get him back. I still think it's one of the most
Yeah,
evil things that
yeah,
David
yeah,
Miscavige has
for
ever
sure.
coordinated is what they did to Marty's wife, who had nothing to do with Scientology ever, except for having married this man. I still don't
I think
agree
that
with
was
it, with the hate that came at her and all these things. It was disgusting.
yeah,
And
that was
he,
the whole point was
yeah,
to make his life so miserable that
oh
he would
sure.
cry
And
uncle.
he chose
Yeah,
he chose
Dave
his
just
wife
wanted
and
him to
his
shut up.
child, and then to do the things, and he got a lot of money. So I understand the mechanics of it,
Yeah,
but
okay, good. Yeah,
to
good.
be honest though, like, let's be real, Marty never left Scientology. He never stopped
Yeah, yeah.
believing in Ron. He never stopped believing in the technology. He practiced it. He's probably still practicing it. He's probably still charging people for auditing that want to go get auditing from a guy who's that highly trained. Like, that's the real deal on that. Let's see here.
Yeah.
No, the answer to this, Nisa, is no. Did any of you two get thrown into the hole? No, I was never at the int base. I
No.
did not have the pleasure to go over the rainbow, as they called it. And Mitch was a public. They wouldn't have thrown him in the hole. That would have been
Well, yeah, it
crazy.
just would be. It would also just be such
That'd
horrific
be so
PR.
out
It was
PR.
like,
Oh my God. Yeah, no, it would have been
yeah,
bad.
it would be really
Scientology
bad.
Triggers wants to know, Mitch,
But
didn't.
I have to
Oh, go
tell
ahead.
you though, Nora, that I was, the hole
Yeah,
where the double wide trailers were, which was
right.
the old whatever conference room for
Hmm.
exec Strad or CMO or whatever it was. I don't remember. Like if you walked from the south side of the road to go to the music studio, for example, you walked right by there. I mean, I walked by there.
Wow.
That thing was you just didn't particularly notice it, right? And it's like, okay, there's a bunch of people in there and they're in ethics trouble and they're getting sec checked or whatever. It wasn't till Miscavige was worried about an FBI raid, so he started letting them out every day. He left the base before they got rid of the whole, and then they started letting them out every day. And so we would see them marching to meals as we were all leaving, and
Wow.
there was like 150 people, and I'd see them being marched by security. That was really creepy. That was
Yeah.
just, you knew something was going on when you saw that. And then I've talked about, we did that Gold video, and I'm like, oh, Gold, Scientology, and we do all the human rights stuff from here, and it's all wonderful.
Blah, 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 blah,
The
blah. Yeah.
hole from where that thing was shot, the hole was within 200 yards, if not in some cases
It's
30 yards
insane.
away,
So
while they
you
were
have
shooting the thing.
crimes against humanity being committed yards away from where these people are like, we're helping all mankind and everything is
Yeah,
great
exactly. It
here.
was. That's why I did that reaction video
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the Gold video, because and I scrolled a list of all names at the end like this. These are all the people that were held prisoner in the hole because it was really horrible.
Yeah. Next question here, Mitch. Didn't Scientology threaten to sue you? How have you been harassed?
They sent me. I should have read it. I should have grabbed it. Gold sent me a letter from
Ooh.
not the port captain. They have like a legal. When I first started speaking out on YouTube, they sent me a letter from the Gold base. Usually, all communication of any serious nature is going to come through the Ivor office, right,
Right,
in
right, right.
Hollywood,
Yeah.
right? But they sent it to me from 11192 Gilman Hot Springs, whatever the frickin' address is out there,
Wow.
on the Gold stationery from there, right? So I knew it was like, oh, they're just scared. They're trying to keep Dave from knowing
Yeah.
that I'm speaking out because they're trying to contain it. And they sent me a really nasty letter, which is where the alleged, unconfirmed number of $8 million came from that unfortunately a content creator decided to spread around, which I never understood why, because I mentioned that because I read part of the letter on his channel. But yeah, they said some. I actually read it on Aaron's channel, some of it, not all of it, because some of it is really personal stuff,
Well,
and I'm
yeah.
not going to put it out there because they're writing it to me to make me look bad.
Sure,
So
sure.
I'm not going to then read it. Uh, Basically, they said that I'd violated $750,000 worth of NDA agreements. That I'd
Blah,
violated
blah. Yeah.
about 30. And it came from FedEx. It wasn't like a legal thing. I
No, they
wasn't
didn't serve you
served.
with a notice like you owe us
No,
this money because they can't
no,
collect it. Yeah.
no, because I never signed an NDA that said I won't leave and say what horrible
Yeah.
people you are. I never signed that. I signed an NDA that said I won't disclose your plans. I don't know what your plans are. I've never
Yeah.
talked about your plans
I mean,
ever. So there doesn't
but
think
also, guys, just as a note, the NDAs that most people who left around the time that I did in the 2000s, I don't know that they're still doing it because their contracts now are so, like you're already saying you're never going to say anything just in the staff contract itself. But like the
right,
NDA that
right,
I was forced to sign under duress in the HGB, in the Hollywood Guarantee Building there on Ivar in Hollywood,
right.
is not legally enforceable. It's
No.
it's just it's a threat on paper. They don't
Well, you
file
can't.
it.
You you
They
can't.
can't.
Yeah, you can't make a person sign a document that says they won't commit a report on a crime.
Right.
You can't do that. It's not
Right.
legal. So yeah. So anyway, I read some of it on YouTube. I went on Aaron's channel. We did the thing. Then while we were doing it, some people may have seen this. It was a while ago. He called his lawyer friend Zach. We showed the part of it to him, and he said, "Well, if you're going to answer, I would just take a picture of you doing this and send it back if you're going to answer." But I never answered it. I wrote an
Yeah. Don't
answer. I put
answer
it
it.
away.
There's no point.
Yeah, there's
There's
no
no
point.
point.
And he
Yeah.
said he read it, and his lawyerly opinion was, "This is a letter from an angry ex-girlfriend."
Yeah.
So, so
And
I
none
just
of
left
it's
it at that.
enforceable. But as Scientologists, let's be honest. If you were still active in Scientology and you received that letter, you would have shit your pants. You would have been
Oh my
like,
God. Oh yeah, but because basically it said that I needed to go sit in the corner and consider what a bad man I am.
right. I mean,
That's
that to
basically all it said.
Scientologists, everything they tell you is 100% true. You're gonna go to jail. Oh my God. Like you believe all of it. There's no
Yeah,
questioning it.
yeah, it
This is the
was
one that made me
pretty
laugh,
crazy.
Mitch. Fat Cat 7
Yeah.
says, if you could hire Nora to help produce your next film, what position would you give her?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to do an interview with her. Probably, I don't know. Maybe casting. Maybe I'll put her in
Okay.
charge of like
Okay. I would love that.
rounding the
Casting would be
people up.
fun.
Yeah,
Casting would be
because
fun.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I'm
I know
trying to
why that
think.
question got asked, though, because I was an associate producer on Leah's show, and I've explained many times. They're like, oh, your name's not in the credits. Okay, first of all, that was a legal issue with IBC, who ran the show. They decided they wanted to just have me on the show and tell my story, but I couldn't because I had been on Jamie DeWolf's show, and A&E canned that
Right.
show. It's literally sitting on the shelf somewhere in A&E's stock room. And so for legal reasons, I couldn't have any like showy participation, but Leah wanted my help. And through pure nepotism, as most of Hollywood works, because I knew Leah, she put me in the crew there, and I did what I did, which was help find the references that were being talked about during the show so that they could put them up on the screen and translate for the other producers and associate producers what the
Right,
fuck people
right,
were talking about, because they would come out of
right.
the interview and be like, what the hell just happened? Like, because they didn't, Scientology is its own language. And so that was really the majority of my job. But yeah, so
Yeah, so
Mitch,
yeah, I mean,
would you give me a
you may
job?
not have. Yeah, I would. I think it'd be a lot of fun, and not craft services. Okay,
Thank
because
you. Fuck that.
yeah,
No, I'm good at
not that.
cooking,
Yeah,
but
but
I
no,
don't
I
want to be
think
craft services.
no, you don't want to do that. I mean, I think the real technical skills like shooting and sound and all that stuff.
Sure.
But there's all of these organizational skills, like
Hmm.
you were talking about as a social producer. I think you could do any one of those jobs. I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass, but I
Oh,
think
thank you.
from interacting with you, I think you would be good at any of those jobs. You can just kind of pick it up and do it because it's not a big
I
deal.
appreciate that. I'm
But
faking
I
it till
think
I
you would
make it
really be
always.
good. I think you'd be good at figuring out who should be in it. So
Oh yeah,
we're
casting
going
would
to
be
put
a
you in
dream. I
charge of
love that.
casting. Yeah,
That would be fun.
yeah,
Jersey Jan wants to know,
and
Mitch.
maybe
Oh,
wardrobe.
go ahead. And maybe wardrobe. I don't know about that.
Yeah,
My kids would beg to differ. Are you
yeah.
currently working on some film for Scientology?
No. So
No. Okay, there we go.
I
No.
kind of, no, I'm not. It's not that I wouldn't. I'm, if the circumstances arose, if the opportunity presented itself, I would. I'm working on some other things because it's like at some point you have to say Scientology is no longer just the all-consuming thing for me, and making a film is all-consuming,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of like I don't think. Here's my view on leaving and speaking out. If when you leave, like when I left or when you left, you had
Mm-hmm.
experiences such that you really should stop on your way out and say, let me tell you what the hell happened in there, because it was crazy. However you do that, you write a book, you go on YouTube, however it is, you have an obligation to do that. Not in every case. Some people, just the fact that they've stopped the harm, just the fact that, I mean, I have a couple of friends who were hugely important individuals at the international base at one time or another, who left and never spoke out. Just the fact that they took their support away was a huge blow. And they felt, in terms of their forward trajectory and their mental health, they just wanted to get on with their lives. And I would never fault somebody for that. They didn't even stop on their way out and say what happened. And that's like, that too is their personal choice. I personally think for me, I had to stop, say what happened, and now I'm in the, am I going to move on stage? You know what I'm saying? It kind of depends on the opportunity. I had an opportunity that I created, as something I'm developing, which will be very entertaining and I think will help a lot of people. And so why not do that? So that's my point. I mean, I think it would be great. Um, when I left, the first person I called, there were a couple of people I texted on Facebook. When I left mentally and I made that decision, I'm going to reconnect with people. First person I called was Jeff Hawkins, because Jeff Hawkins
Okay.
had been a dear friend, and I knew him since the '80s. I knew
He's a
him at
good
Gold,
guy.
and I
He's a great
felt
guy.
he's a really good guy. And I
Yeah.
felt kind of like I remember hearing about Jeff being assaulted and all the trouble he was getting into, and I
Right.
thought, well, maybe he deserved it. I mean, this is you're not. No, I'm serious, Nora. This is a
At the
confession.
time
I'm telling
or
you.
now?
At the time,
Okay.
no.
Okay. Let's
Oh yeah,
clarify.
some. Oh yeah, I'm really bad at time track context. At the
Oh,
time,
Mitch, that was bad. But yeah, I get it. So
yeah,
when you were
no,
when you were at
see
Gold
that's
working,
why I'm always getting in so much trouble. Yes, back then I'm thinking, well, maybe he did something to deserve it. And I thought all the abuse was being exaggerated. And then when I saw it myself, I was like, oh, everything that I've heard is probably true, because a person who did that is capable of doing everything I've heard. Then when I left, I called Jeff to kind of reaffirm the fact that I supported him and that I was his friend, and that he sent me an autographed copy and sent it in my book. We had some really great conversations, but I also called him because I wanted to get Mike Rinder's number, because I knew Mike since 1990. And so I think spoke with Mike for 3 hours. He was driving somewhere. I had a long drive, so we spoke on the phone for a long, long time. One of the things that Mike said, he said, Mitch, you have no idea how much power you have, because what you did for the church, you could do that against them. And that must really be scaring the shit out of them, which is part of the reason why they're not going to sue me. Because another reason is I have a really good lawsuit against them, a couple
Mm-hmm.
of particular people for elder abuse and workplace bullying. And so if they come after me, I'm just going to sue them for that. And it would just be really ugly because people don't like elderly people like me being picked on and beat up,
No.
right? So, but anyway, so that's, those words that Mike said to me ring true in my ears because he said, you have the, so if I thought I was in a position, to get with you, get some funding, say, Nora, round up a bunch of usual suspects. We're going to make a film. We're going to interview these people. It's just going to be a burner. We're going to cover these really hot topic issues. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
challenge law enforcement. We're going to ask the UN, please do something about this. We're going to send it to film festivals. We're not talking a YouTube video. We're
Yeah.
talking
No.
like,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that goes
yeah,
to a question that's here at the bottom that somebody
I would do
said,
that.
are you willing to,
Absolutely.
and this is from Pinche Becky, are you willing to make an anti-Scientology film starring Nora and the second gens and the third gens? Guy, I don't need top billing, but thank you, Pinche Becky. Would you,
I think
and
I
I think
answered
I
that.
think that's what you're talking about right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm more
Now,
than willing. I just don't know how to make that
yeah,
happen. So,
this is a brainstorming thing. This is a brainstorming thing, guys,
yeah,
that
right.
first of all, films need funding. It's expensive
Yeah,
to make a film.
yeah.
But I just want to acknowledge Bo Beats. I have seen your question. I'm going to discuss your question with Mitch off air
Okay,
because it's a sensitive subject, Bo. Not because I think it's an irrelevant question, but I'm going to talk to him. He can't see the
okay.
questions, so I'm
I
going to talk.
can. No, well, I see
Well,
the chat, but I'm not.
yeah, but I just want to acknowledge
Okay,
I've seen your
okay.
questions, Bo, and I will talk to Mitch about that very specific one off air. Okay.
Maybe we could crowdsource enough money to make a film. I don't
Yeah.
know. Who
Fuck
knows?
yeah. We could do it. We could do it. Let me see here. Okay, this is a funny one. I think this is for you, Mitch. Could you please tell us,
Okay.
David Miscavige hates having to look up at everyone just to look them in the eyes? Is that a button for
I'm
him?
not going
People's
to.
height?
I'm not going to body shame, just on principle. I don't care who it is.
But
Um,
does he require people to sit when he's talking though? When he
no.
wants to talk to them, like
He's
seriously.
actually pretty comfortable at his height because he feels he's like the
He
Pope.
feels he's a big dog.
Yeah, yeah, he's a
Yeah.
big guy. And plus, we thought when we were in there that he's the most powerful person in the world because he doesn't need nuclear weapons. He has Scientology. So,
Boom.
yeah, and he knows that everybody worships him that way. So he's like
Wow.
a big guy. No,
Uh,
I mean, I always, like when we were in meetings, I was always like this. I would literally always just, no,
get
I'm 6 foot
get a
tall,
little
so, but I
smaller. No,
wouldn't,
you're tall,
yeah,
Mitch.
I
You're not a
wouldn't,
short
I
guy.
would, yeah, I wouldn't sit up like this. I would just
Yeah.
kind of like lean down a little. You felt like you needed to like
Yeah.
not point it out, but like, let
Yeah.
me just go on record as saying what's wrong with David Miscavige is not his height. Okay.
No.
That is not what's wrong with him. So,
It's his
so
pompadour. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's the pompadour. But I did engage in one little bit of body shaming. There's like a little executive, very well appointed gym up at Gold. I could use it. Executives would use it.
Sure.
And sometimes I was in there when Miscavige would come in, and I made a comment because he would wear very tight exercise clothes, and I sort of noticed and seemed to be an absence of what some people refer to as a package, right? And oops, I did it again. So I was going over this with Aaron, and then I cut it into a short, right? And I put it up, and my older child, my son, he's 30, saw it. And this guy, my son wouldn't walk across the street to piss on David Miscavige. His pee was on fire. And he knew him personally. I mean, he just hates this man. He made me take that video down just on principle that it was body shaming. So,
To
I don't
discuss,
engage in it.
well, I mean, and listen, that is a syndrome. That is a real thing. Tiny penis syndrome. That is a thing that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real thing that causes other
Yeah.
mental issues. And, I mean, it can be funny. It's shaming. It is the thing, but that's just real life. I mean, that's just real. And that makes
Well,
total sense, you know?
then it becomes not just body shaming, but becomes mental health shaming, which is
Right. I
also
mean, but
something
here's
I
the thing.
really
We
try
all
to
know
avoid.
that David Miscavige is not mentally well. He's not a good person. Um, you know, he's evil and he does evil things and he hurts people on a daily
Yeah,
basis. I mean, that's
he
just
had a yeah, he was raised by a man who
oh, and his
was
dad was a psycho too. I mean, everybody wants to
yeah, and he
sanctify
was
Ron Miscavige Sr., and that guy was a complete piece of work.
no, I mean, I kind of regret. I had stuff that I was writing about him that I didn't include on my book because he died and people were really sensitive about it. But
No,
and
I
I really
understand.
wanted to say, I'm just going to go on a record and say
Yeah,
right now that guy raised a monster.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
he
He
that
did.
guy
He
and
did.
I got so sick and tired of his racist, homophobic,
Mm-hmm.
misogynistic jokes. He
Are we
was
talking
like,
about Ronnie Senior or we're talking about Miscavige or both?
we're talking both, but
Yeah,
really
both.
Ronnie because
No,
there
but like
Ron Senior.
let's be honest because here's the deal: the Miscavige family is really fucked up. Like,
Yeah, totally.
especially the elder. Ronnie was a very like shuck kind of guy when you met him and you like he was going to do something fun. But behind the scenes, he was a fucking bastard. He admitted in his own book
Yeah,
to beating his wife, right? So it
yeah,
wasn't,
yeah.
this isn't like oh, when did you stop beating your wife? Like Ronnie Miscavige fully admitted that he beat the fuck out of his wife and his
Yeah, and he
kids,
was,
right? And he was
yeah,
heavily abusive. And
yeah,
then we have David, who, shocker, then has somebody following his own father and they're like, I think something's wrong with him. He's probably going to die. There's like, let him. Like, that's not a shock that this man created this other man who's a total psychopath, you know, and Ronnie Jr. also not a good guy,
yeah,
not
yeah,
a good guy. And
yeah,
his wife, Biddy, not a good lady, not a good lady. She was a tyrant in the Sea Org, but nobody calls them out because it's like, well,
right,
blah, blah, blah. It's
right,
like, but they were central figures to many people, not just David.
yeah,
And David gets the spotlight, let's face it, because he's the head of Scientology, right? But
right.
Biddy and Ronnie Jr. and Ronnie got away with a shit ton of stuff. Ronnie was a fall down alcoholic and was like
Yeah, well,
booted from
I don't,
rehearsals multiple times,
yeah,
but he never got kicked out of the Sea Org, right? Because he was Ronnie Miscavige Sr., right?
yeah. I mean, he
I
left
mean, it's
once and
just,
came back. I mean,
yeah.
I don't include Biddy in that crowd. I mean, eventually she divorced Ronnie Jr. and I didn't know her well, but I interacted with her enough that I always really liked her, and so I'm kind of not going to
But
paint her
see,
with that
I'm sure
brush.
in conversations with
I
you,
don't want to argue about
this is where
this, though.
experience
Yeah,
comes, right? In conversations with
yeah.
you, I'm sure you guys were cordial, right? So you guys had a cordial
Very,
experience.
very much so. And I
Like as
also
an
saw how
example,
much,
yeah, every time I talked to Ron Sr., I thought he was like a super sweet guy because he would come down to
yeah,
CC to play for the gala.
yeah.
And then we would have those interactions. And like he would remember me every time. And I would remember what he liked to
Oh,
drink. And so,
yeah,
do you think,
yeah,
to me, I was like, oh, this is like a sweet pop. Like I'm cool. And then I would hear when I got on the RPF and I
yeah.
was on the RPF with people who were at it with him, they're like, oh my God, fuck that guy. And they're telling me these stories. And I'm like, this is not the person that I spoke to all those times. So, like obviously
Right,
most people who have uh, psychopathic tendencies, narcissistic, personality disorders
right.
are chameleons in that they can
Very
be
much so.
20
Change
different
masks,
people.
one mask, another
Yeah,
mask. Yeah, no, totally.
100%. And
Yeah,
so
but
the same is,
I just
that's
want
all
to
I'm
go on
saying.
record as saying I don't have that opinion of Biddy.
Sure.
And I know, like, she was the one who was responsible for getting I know the ranch is like, it was a
Yeah.
concentration camp for kids, but
Yeah.
it was also, the air was clean and there was a sports field and it was a million times better than those kids being untethered on Hollywood Boulevard and never
Oh,
seeing
I'm
their
sure
parents.
comparatively, but they
So,
were both prisons for children that were completely Lord of the Flies situations that
yeah,
were
yeah, but
it was child
yeah,
torture.
yeah, but I saw her really go through I knew about her going through this effort. Let's kick the RPF guys out of there and let's bring it up and try to create something 20 minutes away for the kids and blah, blah, blah. So I just don't, I'm just not going to sign on to her as being in the same ilk as Ron Jr., as the whole Miscavige family. It's just, I don't think that that's it just doesn't comport with my experience. But we can move on. There's no reason to argue
We
about
don't have
that.
to belabor that point. This is a great
Yeah.
question from Flea Factory. What is your single most important piece of advice for someone just coming out of Scientology?
Well, read a lot. I mean, I read a lot. Like read books that really had an impact on me. The is it the Sociopath Next Door? I think it's Sociopath, not Psychopath. Which when you read that book, I kept flipping to the end to look at the footnotes or look at the glossary, or to see if Miscavige's name was in there because I'm like they knew him. Like this book was so written about that guy. So this Sociopath, I think it's Sociopath Next Door. It might be Psychopath Next Door. It's a really good book. There's another one I think is quite good called This Blew My Mind: Take Your Life Back, recovering from
Mm,
cults and recovering from cults and abusive relationships. Because as you will learn reading that book, they're no different.
mm,
I mean, the word love bombing is used more in reference to abusive relationships, but it comes from the Moonies. It was Sungya Mooney. He invented the term love bombing. He said that's how we recruit. Steve Hassan was, I think Hassan or Hassan, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. He was recruited by two beautiful women in college. He was love bombed into the Moonies. So the dynamics of cultic abuse, and I think Mark Vincenti, the filmmaker who was part of Nexium, who I have a lot of respect for, Mark Vincenti said, "Oh yeah, the difference between a cult and an abusive relationship is just a matter of scale. It's two people versus 20,000 people, but that's the only difference." So that was a good book. Uh, the barefoot Messiah, the barefaced Messiah, bald, whatever it
Barefaced
was,
Messiah.
bald
Yeah,
faced.
that's a great book.
Yeah, the great book. Um, so yeah, I read a lot. I listened to a lot of content. I did a lot of reflecting, and just make sure you have, because I didn't. I had some money in the bank because I'd saved it. It's gone now, and yes, some of it was in a retirement. But when you get divorced, your wife takes half of everything. I mean, in some senses they
In
deserve it. In some
California,
senses
yes.
they. Yeah, I don't want to really get into that, but
Yeah,
yeah, because that's whatever, uncontested divorces, no fault, community property have
yeah.
absolutely lowered the abuse against women. That's a really good thing, but they've also, it's like a lot of people,
It's a double-edged sword,
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to complain about it because the scales are tipped towards helping women,
Hmm.
right? So I'm
Hmm.
not going to really get in there and bitch and moan about it. But, it is a fact that family court judges, if you think of judges as being in a libelous, in a dangerous position because a defendant might kill them, you think,
Sure.
well, that must be criminal, right? It must be criminal judges are the ones that are, right? But it's actually family court judges. More family court judges are either threatened or murdered by men who are being divorced who felt they were treated unfairly. So it would maybe there's some reforms that are due. I don't know. I mean, right now the Republicans, some of these guys, they're talking about just getting rid of the divorce laws altogether, which is it'll be horrible for women if they do that. I think they do that in Texas now. If a woman wants to divorce her husband, they're like, "Good, here's a check for $2,000. Bye." Like that's it,
Yeah.
and you're done.
Yeah.
It's really
I mean,
horrible.
the
But
only piece of advice I would give somebody newly out of Scientology, because I wish I had done this and not what I did, is do nothing.
yeah, well,
Take
I
time
I
to
did nothing,
sleep,
and that
take
yeah,
time
that's
to
true.
rest. If you can get yourself into a position where you have family, where you can just go stay with them for
Yeah,
a bit and just cook and clean and sleep and eat and don't do anything
yeah,
else. Take some time to do nothing. Um, I personally think that's so vital because Scientology is a constant. It's a constant this, and you never rest. You never rest, no matter what your position is in Scientology, whether you're in the seer, you're on staff, you're a public. You need that time for your brain to slow down. Do not, if you can get yourself in that position, this is very privileged. I went immediately to work within 3 days of leaving. Um, uh, but
right, right.
if you can take some time to do nothing, and this is something that I, you know, I may just have to set up my own foundation to do it. But because neither foundations are doing this. But I want to have a place that's just a ranch where people who are leaving Scientology, recovering from Scientology, can just come and literally do that and just have cooks on staff and people on staff. And you're just there to rest. You're just there to connect with nature, to just see the stars, to do nothing and just heal. And then when you're ready for your next step, when you're ready for that, like, hey, I need therapy. Hey, my vision's been fucked up this whole time. I need help getting a job. All those things. Then, on to the next and move on to the thing. But that's my personal passion.
Yeah. Because when we talked earlier about when I said what you leave into is also a big factor in what your outcome's going to be. It's not just what you're leaving, but it's what you're leaving into. So yes.
Okay, we're over 3 hours, so I want to get to
Oh
some
my
rapid fire.
God, no.
I know, Mitch, this is what
We did
happens
it
when we
again.
start
I
talking.
was going to tell you
again.
before. Let's try to keep it to 90 minutes.
I know, right? That was our intention, guys. We went twice as much. We just exchange in abundance. Okay, so let me get to some of these comments because I want you to see these in case you missed them going by.
Yeah,
Scarlet
good.
Fagel says, I think you both did a great job last time. Cricket Cinema says, in the spirit of your original conversation, I'd like to apologize to Mitch for unkind comments I've made and take responsibility. I'm sorry, Mitch. I can do better. This was an interesting comment, just as a little pushback, but also agreeing with you. Respectfully, Mitch, regarding victim shaming, the issue is some of those people who went to the FBI were also the perpetrators. I know they were also victims. And that is a hard thing to reconcile. That's not something you're going to reconcile, Mitch, because you're not all those people. But that is part of the problem that happens where, especially for people like me and other people who suffered at the hands of those people directly sometimes, that's why I think these conversations are important to do the healing. So let me see here. Boom. Okay. Irrelevant Panda says, Mitch is right with Waco. The FBI won't take action after that. My opinion is that the cult has its hooks in high up political positions and the FBI won't act until there's pressure to the polls. I agree. And that's what we've been talking about here.
Right. Hey, real quick regarding the FBI comment, I want to read something. I have it up here.
Sure.
It's a quote from Desmond Tutu. I would just like to share this, and it's about forgiveness.
Yes.
And Desmond Tutu was the first black the Catholic bishop. He was a bishop in South Africa. He worked with
Desmond Tutu.
Exactly. He worked with Nelson Mandela and helped end apartheid and helped South Africa through the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. And Desmond Tutu said, forgiveness is the only way to heal ourselves and to be free from the past. Without forgiveness, we remain tethered to the person who harmed us. We are bound to the chains of bitterness, tied together, trapped. Until we can forgive the person who harmed us, that person will hold the keys to our happiness. That person will be our jailer. When we forgive, we take back control of our own fate and our feelings. We become our own liberator. So that's something that I just personally happen to believe in. So to the person who made that comment, I forgive you. And to the people who came out and spoke out and were also abusers, I'm trusting that what they told, they weren't trying to protect themselves because, and I forgive them as well because I don't want all that bitterness in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't forgive David Miscavige, but I have to tell you, I actually have some empathy for the chaos for a human being living in such chaos. I wouldn't extend a hand to help him. I said, I wouldn't walk across the street to piss on him if he was on fire. But anyway, that was, I said what I had to say. Okay, carry on.
Marilyn says, respectfully, I believe the rhetoric goes both ways. Until recently, there seemed to be a lot of talk of abuse at the top rather than child trafficking, elder abuse, etc. They need grace too. And I agree. I agree with that. That we need all of it. We need, it's hard to focus a laser beam in 25 different directions at once. And that's why we start from the bottom up, guys. We start from the bottom up from these fucking front groups and other things, because that's super important. And Donna Hannah, I got your email about Kira Sedgwick. I got it. Thank you for, I see that in the comments here. I did get that. Let's see here. This is true. Scientology Trigger says if everybody bought 10 of Mitch's book every week, maybe it could be a bestseller like Dianetics, Modern Science of Mental Health. That's true. We
Yeah,
could start a whole campaign just like
yeah.
Scientology does. And I think that should happen for everybody who writes a book about Scientology. Because did you self-publish your book or were you published by a publisher?
No, I self-published it,
Okay.
but I did it at a very high level. I mean,
Well, no. I'm not knocking self-publishing because I think it's
yeah.
brilliant and there's so many
Well,
great books out there
yeah, one
because of
thing
that.
that I
You know.
discovered, you get a much better deal when you self-publish it. The problem is you don't really have the same resources to market. But one thing I discovered is self-publishing, it's not a joke. It's like the music business. Like you don't need a record company anymore. Taylor Swift, she doesn't need a record company. She is the music
She
business.
is the
It's like
music industry. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like publishers. If I was very lucky. I had a person who I knew from the past who's is going to remain anonymous, who designed my book, who has 50 credits to their name in terms of very renowned, a really legitimate book designer. Did the cover, did the inside.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, but I did self-publish it. But you asked because
Yeah. Yeah, because somebody put that. I asked because distribution and things is much harder when you self-publish your book versus having, Simon and
well,
Schuster publish your book
yeah,
and then
not
they are,
so. Yeah, it's the marketing. It's not the distribution. Today, that
right.
like okay, so I didn't just. Most people just self-publish on Amazon because that's easy and that's what they know. But
Right.
because I had worked in book marketing for the church, I knew a little bit about it,
Hmm.
and I have associates that knew a lot about it and helped me. So I didn't just self-publish on Amazon. I also self-published through Ingram's. Ingram's is the world's largest distributor and manufacturer of books. That's who like we used to work with on all the Dianetics books. And you can they have a platform called Ingram Spark where you can self-publish
Mm.
there as well.
Okay.
And they print beautiful books. The ones that are in my merch store, the ones with the actual dust cover and the
Right. Right.
printed jacket, those really beautiful books. And then they're available to libraries. Like you'll never get into a library or bookstores if you're on Amazon because the libraries and the
Mm.
bookstores don't order from Amazon. So you have to go through Ingram's. And so, and I
Interesting.
get, I'll get, 10 cents here and there because you could go into a Barnes and Noble or any major, and please, if you do this, I would be forever grateful. You could buy it on Amazon. If you buy a hardback, you'll get a much nicer one. But you can walk into a bookstore and
Yeah.
ask for it, and they'll look it up at Barnes and Noble, and they'll say, "Well, we don't have it in stock, but we can order it for you, or you
Right.
can order it from Barnes." So I did manage to, I had this dream of getting a book dump in Barnes and Noble by Christmas when I released it, because I just knew all these Scientologists would be walking into Barnes and Noble to buy gifts, and they would see a book dump right when they walked in the door that said Scientology: The Big Lie.
Hmm.
So yeah, I did. I self-published on Amazon and on Ingram's, and then also on Apple Books and on Google Books. So I
Yeah.
kind of did the whole panoply.
There you go. Danny Mustard in the house says the ethics officer is a trauma dominatrix. I agree. I agree.
I'm
I
sorry
agree.
for laughing, but
No,
I'm
it's
kind of getting.
yeah.
They have that. What do they call the stick? The stick that they had. Remember they
Um,
carried the.
the baton.
It has a
Yeah, I
name.
can't remember.
Yeah, it has a name,
Yeah, it's a
and I'm just
bully stick or
imagining this.
something. I
Yeah, I'm
can't.
imagining this
Yeah.
this sexy woman in latex with chains and carrying that stick and like
Oh my God.
ethics
Yeah,
officer
it's
thing.
probably one of the props you can get. Donna
Yeah, now
Hanna says,
I need to unsee that.
oh, yeah, right. Amen, Mitch. I love that you're willing to call out people on both sides. And I love the idea of letting people know their tax dollars are at stake. That will wake up
Hmm.
people that are sleepy. I agree. I agree. The end of musing. Thank you for
Yeah,
the super chat. Hi, longtime lurker, but your chat about trauma, CPTSD/I, ADHD is great. My channel died because I kept freezing. I would love to use some clips of yours to comment on non-cult context. Too much respect for you to just cite fair use. Oh yes, please use them. But you have my permission. I'm giving you my permission
yeah.
publicly to use those.
If I could pick one real quick. Duchess Diana said, "Question, Mitch, what are you drinking? It looks good. Ginger beer? No, actually, this is Topo Chico with lemonade in it,
Topo
and
Chico,
you can see,
guys.
the ice has melted, which tells me we've been on a long time. There's no
Yeah,
more
we've been
ice
on
left
a
in the
very
mug.
long time. Liz Gale, I'm just going to throw you up here because she just said comment.
Oh, great.
I'm sorry, that was too funny. She forgot to type the rest of the stuff. All vulnerable people, kids, elderly, disabled, ill, need to be advocated for in our fight against Scientology. 100%, Liz. 100%. 100%. Kitty says, I'm glad you're talking about this. Last night, I was talking about exploitation of the children in cults. It's disgusting. I also want people to know about this. Thank you for being here. Let's see here. Apostate Alex says, I did a video a while ago comparing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Scientology's version in their PSAs. They've changed a lot. Okay, Alex, well, we'll have to pump that up. Yeah, we could just dive into that, a lot. Let's see here. Danny says no forgiveness in Scientology. That's the truth. There is. And then there was
not actual forgiveness. It's fake forgiveness.
And this is for you. For Blake Reed says he wants you to know, for the sake of good blood, I apologize for many things I've said about you, Mitch. I was hateful and angry, and I'm willing to clear out that hate. So
thank you, Blake.
That's from Blake.
I appreciate that, and you're forgiven. Totally. Like by the power vested in me by myself, you are forgiven. I was like saying this a while ago, that what we need in this community is like what they did in what?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm laughing at Dino Nuggets, who always brings the great humor. They've been on so long, I got a degree from the University of Phoenix.
Yeah, nice. But we all need to kind of come to the table and dump our shit and say what we did and say what we're sorry. And so thank you, Blake. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. No, guys, this has been absolutely fantastic. Once again, Topo Chico is the drink that we are both enjoying. Mitch added lemonade to his, which just elevates it even more. Topo Chico comes in this.
Mine's
in
not.
I'm
one. Not drinking the lime one.
So Mitch is drinking the plain one, to which he added lemonade to make a sparkling lemonade because it's mineral water. And I am having the twist of lime because I like a little bit of flavor in mine. And this is just perfection. It's good. And I love the glass bottle. I love everything about it.
Yeah, most things from Mexico in a bottle. The
best.
Is
especially
usually
Coca-Cola.
the best. Coke,
Mexican Coca-Cola is the best.
The best, yeah.
Hands down.
There's arguments about why it is, but
it's
go on
they
forever.
Use cane sugar and not high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, that's one of the arguments. They don't use, they use cane sugar. Also, the water in Mexico is very tasty. I don't mean the water in the plumbing will kill you water, but the well water from
don't drink that.
Yeah, the well water from underground is very tasty. So yeah, Mexican cooks are famous. Mexican beer, you name it. So, and their water is the best.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna wrap up here on a very high note. Thank you to my mods for putting up. Please send me boxes of money. Send Mitch boxes of money. We both need oodles. Yeah. Just parachute it in. Drop it in. We'll take it. All right.
And we might spend some of it on a film. Who knows?
There we go. Well, we'll have to set up a real live. We'll figure out a good funding site or something, and we'll talk it out. We'll have to actually this could be a real thing, guys. Like let's make the film that we've been wanting to make for a long time to get the more there's as we know here on YouTube, there's no shortage of material, okay, like to talk about Scientology, so we can make it happen.
I don't want to commit our friend Rachel, but I'm sure she would be delighted to shoot it.
She's a great cinematographer.
She's very talented.
She's fantastic. She's also very busy doing work.
Very busy. I mean, we started working together right after she joined the Sea Org in 2004. So I've known her for a long time.
No, she's fantastic. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we're going to end it here. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Please take care of yourself today. Enjoy the rest of this great holiday. All right. We love you. And we'll see
I don't
you on
know if mine's working. No, mine's not working today.
Got it. There you go.
There it is. There it is. Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you as always to all my mods and all my members. And guys, click that link. Scan it, click it, love it. Send me boxes of money. I need it. I'll see you guys on the flippity dippity.